As of this recording and initial posting, I haven't yet seen Avengers Endgame. I'm not sure that anyone outside of Marvel Disney has, but that's another matter, unless of course you're first watching this a week later on YouTube, in which case my review has been posted, so go see what I thought of it. I'm sure it's riveting. Endgame, of course, is being touted as the climax to just over a decade's worth of Marvel Cinematic Universe storytelling, although they did just now suddenly come out and say, actually, no, wait, that Spider-Man movie that's coming up right after is the official ending to Phase 3, which honestly feels more like saying, hell, the MCU Spider-Man looks kinda underwhelming after Spider-Verse. We'd better give people more of a reason than Jake Gyllenhaal wearing a fishbowl that they should give a shit, because, come on, is there really going to be some major unresolved plot point from the universe-altering cosmic war that doesn't get resolved until Peter Parker's European field trip? And of course, there's a certain amount of relativity in that. One of the reasons the Marvel Cinematic Universe has worked, where other attempts like Dark Universe or Zack Snyder's original plan for the DC Extended Universe did not, is that it didn't actually have some grand, complex, specific narrative mapped out beforehand to adhere to, apart from, hey, this shared universe thing where the heroes can all bump into each other on the street and start clubs and be friends made us a whole shitload of money in the comics, so maybe we should do that for movies. And what now feels like a micro-character theme about found family, not going it alone, friendship, teamwork, self-sacrifice, etc., and a macro-ideological theme that's about breaking down barriers, universality, brotherhood, and maybe possibly more specifically globalism and post-nationalist unity of the type where Disney still gets to be an all-encompassing capitalist empire, of course. Besides, the main overwhelming reason the MCU became the reigning pop mythology of the early 21st century is that the meta-narrative, actual narrative, and individual film plots always ran a distant second to creating and focusing on the development and interplay between strong, compelling characters. That's why the Marvel movies that are mostly about plot minutia and filling in story details are the ones that aren't as good, and Endgame is supposed to be the end for a good few of these now globally beloved characters. So in the respect that the story of all this had been the global audience's collective relationship with their favorite characters, yeah, parts of those stories are coming to something like an actual end, and that's kind of a big deal. Which of course means that everyone's attention will then soon turn to what comes next, since committing to this whole continuity thing and then getting everyone actually attached to a bunch of characters most of mainstream culture could not have cared less about prior to 2008 means that reboots or recastings aren't necessarily a sure thing, and it doesn't seem like they're in a huge hurry to do next-generation torch-passing stories yet. And that in turn means this whole project is suddenly in sort of uncharted waters again for the first time in forever, just in time for rival studios to get their shit together, particularly Warner Brothers, which after shitting the bed for a while, apart from Wonder Woman, now has a brand new blockbuster franchise family audiences are in love with Shazam, and are possibly about to make the kind of money we'll need to invent new numbers to count off of Detective Pikachu. Well, as Marvel goes, apart from the known quantity of Spider-Man Far From Home and the culturally adjacent but otherwise not spectacle of watching the already pre-defunct X-Men movies run out the clock in Dark Phoenix, which I believe now has been almost completely reshot 3 times to try and achieve a releasable movie that nobody asked for. The big mysterious question mark is supposedly the Eternals, which nobody knows anything about other than it's based on a fairly obscure 1970s Jack Kirby project that was yet another go-around on the whole ancient astronaut chariots of the gods head trip cosmic mythology thing that he got really into, kind of similar to the DC New Gods stuff, not very popular on its own in its day, but later folded ubiquitously into the retroactive mythos of the Inhumans, Captain Marvel, Thanos, that whole thing. I have honestly no idea how the Eternals is going to work as a movie. I presume it'll end up being fairly different from the comic incarnation, if only because everything about that was very of its time, and also you don't want to end up being too similar to the New Gods movie Ava DuVernay already has in development over at Warner Brothers. If in fact we end up finding out any great detail about where the MCU version of Thanos came from, and if he's got any extended family or backstory relations still hopping around the universe, I imagine that'll play a part. Bottom line, Marvel seems pretty jazzed about this. Angelina Jolie and Korean badass Ma Dong-seok are in the cast. Angle seems to be Game of Thrones, but in space with superheroes. Hey, we'll see. Speaking of space stuff, Disney came to their f***ing senses, listened to reason and an unprecedented backlash from moviegoers, and brought James Gunn back into the fold, meaning that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is actually going to happen, eventually. There really isn't any more information on that front. I just like reminding people that it happened and the good guys actually won for a change. Speaking of good guys winning, a big priority for Marvel post-Endgame looks to be making the general character roster a bit more on the diverse side, since as the sage wisdom of angry YouTube men foretold, get woke, go broke, in your knees and your lower back from carrying your giant sacks of money because Captain Marvel and Black Panther both cleared like $1 billion and YouTube angry men don't know anything.
You stupid.
And part of that push will be the MCU's first theatrical East Asian superhero, Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, which may or may not end up receiving a more appropriate modern-day subtitle, possibly Shang-Chi, we're sorry about Iron Fist. Black Panther 2 also officially announced on those same lines. The original, of course, was a cultural phenomenon even beyond the usual Marvel fandom, the highest-grossing and best-reviewed solo Marvel movie, at least until Captain Marvel, and ultimately the first superhero film ever to be nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, so hey, no pressure on that follow-up, right? Also, the long overdue Black Widow solo movie, which despite being solo will probably still feature several other new or returning characters as support or teammates, because if you noticed, all of these movies are more or less team-up movies about surrogate families, because Marvel is going to ride that horse until they don't have a horse anymore, which at this point has been so long in coming it feels less overdue and more like a victory lap, since Johansson long ago proved she can open an action movie on her own. And it doesn't really feel like it since he kept popping up in other people's movies, but Doctor Strange was kind of a while ago, and Doctor Strange 2 is taking its time, but it's been announced and supposedly on its way in the next few. I would not be surprised to see them try and launch a magic hero team around that character and see who they can spin off from there, especially now that they've got the whole Disney Plus streaming service to fill up. Oh yeah, Disney Plus, that's now part of the equation. And they've already announced, oh yeah, there's also 2 Untitled movies that they've already reserved space for in their budget schedule apart from the other's name that apparently can't be revealed until after Endgame comes out because the titles are spoilers or something, so yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, as I was saying, they're cramming a bunch of MCU continuity content into the new streaming service, having already announced series based around Hawkeye, Vision and Wanda, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, and an animated anthology based on What If comics that will retell big stories from the movies, but if things had happened differently. Cool, I think. And that's not even touching on stuff that's kind of connected, but also kind of not. Things felt clearly meant to connect Venom to the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, also felt noticeably chopped out and reworked to downplay them at the last minute because everyone involved realized Venom had turned out terribly and didn't want it anywhere near Spider-Man, but then people ended up enjoying it as kind of a fun, terrible movie, and it made money, so now they maybe have to say that it does count, and there's probably another one on the way.
On my planet, I am kind of a loser, like you. But here, we could be more.
Excuse me?
And I'm getting to like it here.
Oh, you like us now, do you, huh? Cut the bullshit. What really made you change your mind?
You did, Eddie.
Also, Morbius the Living Vampire with Jared Leto for some reason, which also is a maybe, maybe not Spider-Man MCU adjacent thing in the same sense. Look, if it keeps Disney and Sony friendly enough that maybe Tom Holland does a Spider-Verse crossover at some point and leads to MCU versions of Gwen and a few of the others sooner than later, I'll take it. And the elephant in the room, of course, is still the X-Men and Fantastic Four properties, now reclaimed from the Fox merger, which no one is saying anything about other than keep waiting. Despite rumors and gossip and fan theories, no, I sincerely do not think that Endgame or its post-credit scenes will involve some kind of dimensional crossing bullshit that makes the X-Men show up or changes history so they've always been there, or Thanos creates the mutants or whatever. I don't think anything like that is coming in Dark Phoenix either. To be honest, the only X-Men thing Disney seemed actively eager to reassure anyone about is the only X-Men property anyone has cared about in theaters for the last few years, Deadpool. They couldn't wait to confirm, don't worry, we'll still make Deadpool movies. And it honestly would neither surprise nor bother me at all if they solved this entire issue by just starting Deadpool 3 in an MCU where he, mutants, and the X-Men have just always been around and part of things, made a few meta jokes about that not making sense with the continuity, then had Deadpool make more jokes about how it's a goddamn superhero movie and we should stop dwelling on stupid bullshit like that and just enjoy the prospect of Hulk eventually fighting Juggernaut or whatever and just let that be the final word on the subject. That would probably be better than spending a whole serious movie dealing with it. Anyway, that would be the game post-Endgame that we know of so far. Don't know that I have a larger point this week, but these movies sure are a pleasant distraction from the impending global climate apocalypse, aren't they? Okay, lots of ground to cover, no time to get all flowery with the intro. If you clicked this, you know what you're in for here. Lots of crazy shit went down in Avengers Endgame that seems to change the math for several big movies and streaming projects that were already announced for the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward, and in general, people now have questions. So let's do this once again. Iron Man and Black Widow are dead, Thanos and his whole army are dead, all the snapped people came back to life, but Vision didn't because he died before the snap. Gamora is back, but it's a different Gamora from an alternate timeline, who never joined the Guardians, and doesn't know Quill. Pepper Potts got her own suit of armor, we don't know if she's called Rescue, Iron Maiden, Iron Woman, or something else, and she and Tony had a 5-year-old daughter named Morgan. Thor made Valkyrie the new Queen of Asgard, which may or may not be permanently relocated to Earth, and decided to join up, or maybe just hitch a temporary ride with the Guardians back to space. Bruce Banner and the Hulk are now merged into a single identity, so he's always got the giant Hulk body, but Banner's brain, speech, and mannerisms, and Captain America is now an actual old guy because he went back in time to marry Agent Carter, then reconnected with his buddies in the present to pass the shield to the Falcon, apparently making him the heir apparent to be the new Captain America. Oh, and hey, 90% of the movie took place in the near future 2025, which, hey, hooray for the optimism and assuming there's going to be a 2025, but also I guess that means Spider-Man Far From Home will also take place in the near future, but the rest of the upcoming projects? Well, that's kind of a question now for a few of these, right? Let's start with the obvious one. Hawkeye is getting his own spin-off series on the Disney Plus streaming service. He survived, so it could easily take place after Endgame, but it could just as easily take place in the 5-year gap between that and Infinity War, when we're told he's on the run as a notorious high body count vigilante, and not even the other Avengers have been able to catch him. As an Easter egg for comic fans, he's been using the costume and ninja weapons from his Ronin period. It would not surprise me at all if that's what the series ends up focusing on, and maybe we'll even see Adrian Palicki come back as Mockingbird again. speaking of that, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is supposed to be back. Holy shit, next week actually, with an abbreviated 6th season. The already greenlit Season 7 will apparently be its last. Season 5 was acknowledged to be taking place just before the shit hit the fan in Infinity War, whereas Season 6 will apparently take place just after a 1-year time jump, meaning this might be our first extended view of what the post-snap MCU looked like on the ground level. More unclear still is the fate of Jessica Jones Season 3, the last of the now officially scuttled Marvel-Netflix collaborations, which was completed before cancellation but hasn't aired yet. Technically, the Netflix series were part of the MCU but reference the connection less openly than S.H.I.E.L.D. does, and thus far all of the produced seasons of each series had explicitly been set prior to Infinity War. It's unclear if that mandate will remain for this last season of Jones. Also, Netflix's lawyers have clarified that Disney and Marvel can't develop any new projects using the Defenders-adjacent characters for several years without buying back their share of the rights. But okay, back to the bigger guns. Also en route to Disney Plus is supposedly The Falcon and Winter Soldier, which as far as we know is still the title. However, if you saw Endgame, and if not, why are you watching this, you know that the next to last scene implies that Sam Wilson has effectively been christened the new Captain America by Steve Rogers, S.H.I.E.L.D. and all. Both he and Bucky Barnes have carried the mantle in the comics, of course. So then, are we waiting on a title change for this, or something else? Unlike Hawkeye, this one can't be set pre-Endgame and post-Infinity War, because Bucky and Sam were both among the snapped. It was also a little confusing last week or so, back when we found out that the Disney Plus Vision and Scarlet Witch series is actually going to be called WandaVision, and at least according to a quote from Elizabeth Olsen, would be set in the 1950s or something along those lines. There's been no clarifications, but now that we know Vision is apparently gone for real, I've got a hunch we'll be getting a reality-bending dream world kind of show with this one. See, the movies don't really try to explain it all that well, and it's never really made that much sense, but part of Scarlet Witch's power set in the comics is basically rewriting reality itself by affecting probability or something. Look, it's confusing as hell, but she's absurdly overpowered, and sometimes, like in House of M, she can just kind of make whole other realities if she wants to. So I wonder if the premise here involves her conjuring some kind of simulation where Vision is back or alive, and as for the 1950s setting, maybe they're going to borrow some of the retro David Lynchian family sitcom edge from the bizarre recent Vision comic where he built himself a whole robot family and tried to be normal in the suburbs. I could see that. Plus, the teenage girl daughter Viv from that series has become a Marvel character they've really pushed to the forefront of the comics, so maybe that's where they're heading. I also wonder if there's a question about how the Loki streaming series, which we've heard was supposed to be a weird anthology about Loki showing up and causing trouble at different points in history because he can't do anything new because he's, dead. But during the time travel part of Endgame, when they're back in 2012 during the end of the first Avengers movie, Loki accidentally gets home with the Tesseract and teleports away, implying that he's somewhere loose now, at least in that timeline. That can't change history in the main storyline, of course, because Endgame uses the theory of time travel where you can't change the future, you just create branching timelines into alternate realities, so unless Captain America is going to fix that change as well, we'll get to his whole thing. Were they just being coy this whole time, and that alternate Loki will be the one starring in a series and or returning to the main universe? We don't know, but speaking of Asgardians, wow, there's lack of subtlety, and there's Thor literally handing Valkyrie an entire kingdom to get Tessa Thompson to stick around and make more Marvel movies. So either she's getting a movie, or they're giving serious consideration to the equally unsubtle please make this your social media banner scene where all the female heroes lined up at once in the final battle, and that already felt pretty much like a real-time audience poll for should this be a movie. Or maybe both. And also, while it's a fun gag, I'm now curious to know if Thor is actually going to be a full-on supporting character in Guardians 3, and if so, if that was always the plan or if that's new. Either way, curious to see how that plays out now that there's this unexpected new wrinkle with Gamora, yet not Gamora, in the Guardians franchise proper. Here's a question. Will we ever see Pepper Potts again? Seems like sort of a waste to have a whole new Iron Person going to waste, but supposedly Gwyneth Paltrow is done with the superhero game for a while, so maybe not. I also wonder what the plan is for the Hulk, since an all-CGI all-the-time version means Mark Ruffalo can theoretically keep doing the role without worrying about age or staying in movie star shape. Supposedly Marvel hasn't really bothered to reacquire the solo Hulk movie rights from Universal yet, which is why they haven't done another one, but man, I really want him to do Grey Hulk at some point. Like, you think Ruffalo knows that sometimes Banner turns into a version of the Hulk who's just a total prick and hangs out in Las Vegas and gambles and wears Hulk-size fancy suits and does mob stuff and gets laid all the time? I mean, how could you not want that to be a movie? That sounds amazing. But okay, now the big hey, wait a minute, right? Black Widow is finally getting her own movie after this, but now she's dead. Like, all the way dead, not coming back, apparently. On the one hand, we know that the whole thing about it maybe being a prequel probably has to be true now. On the other hand, what does that mean? Like, where do you go with that? We already know her story and where it ends up, and just finding out what Budapest refers to isn't going to cut it for a movie. Well, I suspect there's more to the story. See, there's a second lead female role in the film that they've been casting very aggressively for that Florence Pugh from Fighting With My Family just recently landed. Now, this is supposedly a hugely sought-after part that every vaguely appropriate young actress in town was reading for, but but no one is allowed to say anything about who the character is or what the role entails. My guess, she's another similar female spy type character, maybe a younger rival, and the Black Widow movie will also serve as an origin story for this character so she can then turn up again in the present day set movies as a successor. Maybe Black Widow 2.0, Spider-Woman maybe, just to keep the theme going, who has no connection to Spider-Man, by the way, despite the name. And then there's Captain America. This is the weird one, right? So at the end of the movie, they send Cap back through time again to return the borrowed Infinity Stones to where they got them from and shut down the potentially disastrous alternate realities that would create. He's supposed to pop right back up in the present again once he's done, regardless how long it takes him to do it, but instead he shows up a few yards away as a now naturally aged 90-year-old man, revealing that he decided to stay in the past once he was finished with the stones, find Agent Carter, and pick up the normal life he missed out on the first time, allowing Endgame to close on a small, sweet romantic note. That's also really confusing if you stop and think about it. Momentarily setting aside the character logic that it feels kind of weird that Captain America, of all people, would actually just hang out in the background of history, knowing not only about all the bad Marvel Universe stuff that's going to happen, like Hydra taking over S.H.I.E.L.D., Bucky being alive the whole time, etc., but also like MLK, JFK, Vietnam, Watergate, climate change, 9/11, a lot of bad stuff, and not do anything about it. According to the rules of time travel in the film, he still shouldn't be there because the timeline where he stayed and married Carter wouldn't be his original future now changed. It would be a new alternate present for him that wouldn't have the original recipe Bucky and Sam waiting to be confused by him. But there's an extra detail. He gives what looks and is implied to be the Captain America shield to Sam, but he didn't have a shield when he left. The shield was destroyed fighting Thanos. In fact, he took Mjolnir back with him in its place. So where did that come from? The only explanation I can think of that doesn't break the established time travel rules and makes sense in character is that when he went back and created the new Married to Peggy timeline, he also did different contemporary to the era superhero and or shield stuff there too, had a replacement shield, maybe probably from Howard Stark, as part of that, and then presumably after other people around him and Peggy had passed on, he traveled back to the point of his original departure like he was supposed to in the original timeline and closed the loop via, I don't know, either timeline has like a dozen super geniuses, gods, and an army of wizards who could make that happen somehow, which, I mean, to me it feels like there's enough that could use more clarification stuff baked into that to justify a whole other movie. I mean, at the very least, doesn't it feel like we should find out what happens when he took the Soul Stone back to Vormir since, you know, the Red Skull is there? And hey, since Thanos destroyed the stones in the main timeline, does he still have to stay there? Like, is the Red Skull loose again now? Except Chris Evans is supposedly done, and it makes sense or not, this does kind of seem like the right note to go out on for that character, so who knows?
Comics are weird.
Okay, so remember how the new Spider-Man movies are technically being made by Sony, even though they're part of and more or less being overseen by the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe thing at Disney that supposedly makes everything more complicated because you've got the interest of a successful studio that's operating at how do we take over the world, but in a nice way levels, bumping up against those of a not really that successful studio that's operating more in the zone of we'll make a movie out of Morbius if it'll keep the lights on for another month. Well, that seemed to happen again with the marketing of Spider-Man Far From Home, which initially opted to get around the problem of how do we market a Spider-Man movie set after Infinity War and Endgame without giving away what happened with Spider-Man at the conclusion of those two movies, considering he appeared to die in Infinity War by just not giving a shit and showing him and a bunch of other people still being alive in the world looking more or less intact, so hey, I guess that whole Thanos thing is gonna work itself out okay, so much for the suspense. Hey, sorry Mickey, some of us don't have Simba, Aladdin, Woody, Elsa, and Star Wars to also land on this year. This is literally all we've got. But okay, Peter Parker's alive, he's doing the European vacation thing with his more interesting school friends, and there's big monsters to fight, apparently, cool, and the bad guy is Jake Gyllenhaal as classic Spider-Man Silver Age nemesis Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, aka the one with the head. Also, apparently Spider-Man gets a nifty black stealth suit for some reason that'll make him kind of look like Spider-Man Noir, which now, thanks to the Into the Spider-Verse, is a reference a lot more people are going to get. Oh, and speaking of Into the Spider-Verse, cue trailer 2 now that Endgame is out and they're allowed to spoil things.
We could have used someone like you on my world.
New world? Beck is from Earth, just not ours.
A snap to a hole in our dimension.
You're saying there's a multiverse?
Multiverse, eh? Alright, so this plus watching Game of Thrones reenact the Daffy Duck talent agent sketch that ends with suicide by dynamite for a punchline is giving me a sense that we're about to hit the nadir of screenwriters and marketing teams being too involved with both one another and writing to outwit plot guessers on social media rather than tell a good story, because putting this information into the trailer, let alone the actual story, feels like it's only there to fuel the self-sustaining free marketing machine by generating free coverage in the form of shows like this, the one you're watching right now, by invoking recent memories of Into the Spider-Verse and the omnipresent issue of those big Fox reboots everyone assumes are coming, thus getting everyone talking about things like, so will there be a Spider-Verse crossover now? Is this how they'll retcon the Netflix shows and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. into a pocket universe? Will the X-Men, or maybe just the 3 actors anyone still cares about, pop out of one of those multiverse portals in an end credit sequence? While fans with even cursory familiarity with the material are presumably expected to just hold back and not blurt out, Mysterio fakes things. Like, that's literally his entire gimmick. He's a disgraced Hollywood special effects guy. He uses tricks and illusions, and sometimes robots and masks or, like, holograms or whatever to make it look like he's doing magic stuff to fool people so he can do crimes. Now, granted, the business going on with these big elemental monster guys, who I guess are being designated as the reimagined Sony Marvel versions of Sandman, Hydro Man, and Molten Man, which I'm not a big fan of, since those are pretty compelling characters in their own right, and this feels like a sloppy way to just toss them off as generic one-off monsters. You know, but whatever. Would probably be hard to sell as just a regular guy doing tricks to an audience now, so this version of Mysterio probably does have some kind of powers from, like, stolen alien technology, like in the first movie, or maybe he's a magic user and Doctor Strange is going to show up. But something else is still probably going on other than a multiverse. Or maybe it's not. I wouldn't put it past the Marvel producers to decide they need a multiverse concept sitting on deck just to be used when they need it, though seeding it into the storyline of a series they only half control that's meant to be tying off the bow on the last phase, rather than starting anything new, would be a curious choice. It's possible I'm completely and totally wrong about this one, and for a change I'd like to be, especially considering some people's more out there guesses about what could be going on. Like, I'd be thrilled if this meant Tom Holland's Spider-Man would be showing up in Spider-Verse 2, and thus make that whole thing canon to the MCU, or for the live-action versions of Miles or Spider-Gwen or the best Doc Ock ever to show up there. I will in fact applaud in the theater if it turns out that really is Nicolas Cage in the black suit, or Tobey Maguire, or Donald Glover, or Andrew Garfield. Okay, maybe not Andrew Garfield. As for whether or not this is going to be what explains where the X-Men come from suddenly, everyone is expected to have a theory for this, and I get it, but this is like Marvel movie number 24, and I feel like hardcore fans still aren't absorbing that that's not how it's worked so far. The approach has still largely been, no one actually cares that much about retroactive inconsistency, so these movies don't have to either. Like, people have been asking for 8 years since the original Avengers, if there were already all these other super people, why weren't they doing anything to help? And then Endgame's answer is, they were, you just didn't see it. See, the Ancient One was helping out right over there, now shut up and watch the movie. Now, I largely expect and honestly would prefer that when the X-Men do show up, it's going to be more like, oh yeah, mutants? Yeah, that's totally been a thing we've all been talking about a lot during the 80 to 90% of our lives that haven't been depicted on screen in these movies yet, okay? And if they are going to do some kind of reality reshaping event, not that I think it's a great idea, but I would bet more on it having to do with the series thus far not having much for Scarlet Witch to do beyond absorbing emotional trauma because, well, precedent, but that's a story for another time. Let's try something else new, or at least that we haven't done in a while. An episode that'll be dated within a couple days, so you gotta watch it right the hell away, by making some San Diego Comic-Con predictions, since it's starting up this week, and by the time anyone watches this, I should be touching down in San Diego myself. Normally, this would be a somewhat daunting task to take on the night before. One has to fly cross-country to Southern California because all the big movie studios and TV companies and everyone else turns up to what used to be a comic book convention to show off their stuff and make big announcements, so there's a whole deluge to go through, but this year, since it was a given that Marvel people were just going to show up and take 20 individual victory laps for Avengers Endgame and then suck enough oxygen out of the gas lamp district to kill Godzilla by probably announcing all or most of the Phase 4 and or Disney Plus Marvel streaming slate, everyone else pretty much said, nah, we're just gonna sit this year out rather than get completely blown off the stage attention-wise. So yeah, this is gonna be an entirely Marvel predictions list. Deal with it.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Okay, real talk, most of the late announced big Marvel presentation will probably be a victory lap about the big year they just had, maybe bring some of the Avengers out one last time, show people some deleted stuff for the DVD, you know, that sort of thing. In terms of what they will show for new stuff or announce, it's always hard to say because of how Marvel makes these movies. Remember that we only just found out that Gwyneth Paltrow shot that whole scene from Spider-Man, and they didn't even tell her it was for Spider-Man, and a whole bunch of people didn't know whose funeral they were supposed to be attending in Endgame until they saw the movie themselves. The safest bet is we'll see something from Black Widow, since that's the next movie supposedly coming out, and maybe get some idea of the plot, the supporting characters, the villain. The big get would be learning the identity of Florence Pugh's supposedly very important but yet unnamed role. Most people are assuming she's the inheritor to the Black Widow identity to carry the franchise forward because Scarlett Johansson is really, really anxious to get back to chasing award roles, but she could just as easily be, say, Spider-Woman or someone else no one's thought of yet. It's probably also time to tell everyone what the Eternals is actually going to be, because no one outside of hardcore comics fandom has ever heard of the Eternals, and no one inside comics fandom has ever really cared about the Eternals. Like, ever. Once. Granted, the last time this was the case, it turned out to be Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was one of the biggest things they ever did, so there's clearly room for this to work, but now that Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, Richard Madden, and Kumail Nanjiani are all signed on, it's probably time to tell people who they're playing and what the hell this thing is about. They also already just surprise announced that they're going to do Thor 4, so for those keeping track, that whole, oh no, everyone and everything you love that started in Phase 1 is all wrapped up now, you'll probably never see the original Avengers on screen again thing lasted a whole couple of months. Obviously, it's a little early to tell us what it's about, maybe we'll will get a title, though. I have to assume the big asks are going to be, will we finally see Beta Ray Bill? Will Natalie Portman come back? If so, will she be Jane Foster female Thor? Will Jeff Goldblum come back? Valkyrie, Lady Sif, Hercules? Hell, will they do Angela like the comics and continue their now legally allowed Neil Gaiman endorsed public trolling of Todd McFarlane? That would be fun. Beyond those three, your guess is as good as mine. Oh, and I imagine we'll also find out who's playing Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu, get a solid yes, we're making these officially confirmation for Black Panther 2, Doctor Strange 2, Captain Marvel 2, and yeah, while I would love to see a big, dramatic, showy, welcome back, sorry about all that bullshit and the haters moment dedicated to James Gunn coming out to reaffirm that Guardians 3 is happening and maybe reveal the new date, I assume they'll play that for nuance and congeniality and just re-announce the movie, though it really would be great if he did end up coming out on stage, James Gunn that is, getting a big round of applause, just officially close the book on all of that shit. Otherwise, who knows? This particular studio is really good at surprises. They covered up Civil War plans right up until the actual reveal, remember? So the big unknowns are unknown still. I don't expect a big Spider-Man announcement because they all have to clear that with Sony. I've heard the same rumors everyone else has about Young Avengers, Dark Avengers, A-Force, Ironheart, Miss Marvel, Nova, etc. as everybody else, and while I'm sure most of those are all on the list to one degree or another somewhere, I don't think they're set to announce any of them just yet, especially the Avengers ones. I feel like they're going to make people wait a while before they call anything else the Avengers again, just to make it a big deal. I do have a long-running cash bet with several people that they'll eventually use the Thunderbolts license for something because, you know. And then there's the big one. Disney owns all the Fox stuff now, so will they announce anything about Fantastic Four and X-Men? I honestly really doubt it. I mean, it would be amazing if they did, just to swerve everyone and say, yep, we're doing Fantastic Four, let's meet the cast, but logistically speaking, it's unlikely, and no, I don't see it. That having been said, it would not surprise me too much if they stage what looks like it's going to be a reveal for one or both of those, but instead it turns out to be just Deadpool coming out to make fun of us for actually expecting that to happen, but then announcing Deadpool 3, since that's the only Fox Marvel thing that Disney has unequivocally said all along, oh yeah, we're gonna make that. And yeah, that's about what I think is maybe likely to happen with all of those things. So that happened. Yeah, I went to cover SDCC for The Escapists, and yes, I live tweeted the really exciting parts of the big Marvel Cinematic Universe Hall H presentation, and yes, I am going to do a follow-up on the previous episode that was all speculation as to how right I was or not, but not right now, because we've got to talk about the big fucking out-of-nowhere surprise they dropped on everyone.
Mahershala, it looks like you brought your own hat, Mahershala. You did? What is that?
That is pretty big, and it was a hell of a way to go out, considering no one was predicting that they were even thinking of doing that, but it's not the big surprise. This was.
For the first time, female Thor. There's only one person who could play that role. I'm going to introduce her to you now. Please, welcome to the stage, Natalie Portman!
Yep, we already knew they were doing Thor 4, now we know they've got a title, a hell of a great logo, Tessa Thompson gets to make Valkyrie the official on-screen first out-of-the-closet LGBTQ superhero in the Marvel movies, and Natalie Portman is back in the franchise to do a version of the Jane Foster becomes Mighty Thor storyline from the 2014 Thor comics, which is kind of two whole separate huge deals. I mean, for real, not even people who thought they might do a female Thor story had much hope for Portman to come back, so seeing her run out on stage at Comic-Con was mind-blowing. The room exploded for it. I was there. Firstly, because Natalie Portman getting pissed off and telling Disney where they could cram it over the prior regime at Marvel Studios, relegating her role to a damsel in distress status and firing Patty Jenkins from Thor 2, was pretty much the black mark on the earlier, shakier days of the MCU management and part of the reason the Thor franchise needed the Ragnarok reboot, and secondly, because while it has its own passionate fanbase and was well received by many comics critics, the Jane Foster Thor story arc and the all-new, all-different character diversity wave that was part of during that period at Marvel was extremely controversial and savagely hated by, well, loud assholes who yell about comics and alt-right conspiracy memes to other malcontents on YouTube, which means Thor Love and Thunder effectively represents a mending of fences with past errors and a doubling down on the $1 billion box office bite me to the haters that was Captain Marvel.
Prove to me you can beat me!
Still, even those who aren't automatically opposed to the idea may have some questions about this, perhaps even some of the same questions that the angry blowhards pretend to have when really they're mostly just upset to learn that the popular culture is thriving just fine without their explicit permission or endorsement. For example, how does a female Thor, or anyone else Thor, work exactly when Thor isn't so much a title or a position as it is a guy's name? Well,
Comics! are weird.
Actually, in this particular case, the answer really isn't all that weird. It's actually pretty straightforward and makes some complete logical common sense. It just kind of seems arcane and complicated because the Thor comics have only ever been kind of popular and people generally didn't care that much for very long to keep things in order, but honestly, it's pretty basic as this stuff goes. Okay, so Thor's original origin, I mean like his comic book origin, not the real-world origin where he's a deity in an actual religion dating back to prehistoric Eastern Europe, was a lot different from the version everyone knows from the movie, inasmuch as he was a more conventional superhero, but with Norse Viking mythology plugged into the slots where made-up sci-fi stuff would usually go. In that version, there was this doctor named Donald Blake who walked with a cane because he had a bad leg and he was out hiking when he witnessed an alien invasion happening, because that happens. Hiding in a cave, he finds Mjolnir, which has the whole inscription about whoever finds this, if he be worthy, take the power of Thor, etc. It turns out Blake is worthy, lucky thing. He becomes Thor and fights off the invasion, finds out he can change back into his normal self, which also disguises the magic hammer as a walking stick. There you go, there's the mighty Thor. Subsequent adventures would flesh out the mythology by revealing that the rest of the Asgardian pantheon was real as well, that they were more like interdimensional, long-lived alien superhumans than actual gods, because Jack Kirby was super into that whole trip, and that Odin had locked Thor up in the hammer behind the whole let's spend some time as a secret superhero identity to whatever puny mortal was decent enough to use you properly arrangement because he'd been a douchebag and needed to be taught a lesson, so that's where that whole plotline from the first movie came from, and for several years of publication, that was the Thor setup. Donald Blake is a do-gooder doctor, he turns into Thor to fight crime and monsters, sometimes there's Asgard drama that's more about Thor than Blake, and he gets sucked into it, and his fellow medical professional Jane Foster was his Lois Lane, the girl who loved both Donald Blake and Thor but didn't know they were the same guy. So you can pretty much plot out how most Thor stories went, and eventually Lee and Kirby and the rest of Marvel got kind of bored doing the Superman routine and retconned their own Thor backstory with a new twist that Blake had actually been transformed Thor all along, and that Odin's enchantment had merely separated him from his abilities, made him weak and mortal, and wiped his memory to teach him humility or something. Odin is kind of a dick. Also, Kirby eventually wanted to scrap the Norse gods from the whole thing entirely and replace them with a whole new cosmology of his own making, and Marvel said, no, we'd rather not, was apparently part, though not the only reason by far, why he eventually pulled up stakes and went to DC, where of course he immediately created a whole cosmology called the New Gods, but that's another show. Anyway, a murderer's row of big guns took over and wrote and drew Thor after Lee and Kirby were done with it, and while it had its highs and lows over the decades, one thing no one ever really cracked was what to do with Jane Foster once the Donald Blake storyline was done with. The idea of Thor as the god fighting to be allowed to be with a mortal woman was stretched out for a long time. Jane would lose and regain her memory and fall in and out of love with Blake, and a Blake lookalike named Kincaid, and Thor would go in and out of a similar situation with Lady Sif, and there was an arc where Jane and Sif were merged into a single person. It was weird. Eventually they just permanently had her forget all of the Thor stuff and quietly ushered her out of the series round about the mid-70s. Now, a lot more happened with the Thor books after that, especially in the 80s when Walt Simonson took over and changed the whole status quo again, basically becoming the preeminent Thor writer probably ever, in part by digging down hard on the Norse mythological deep lore and giving the Mjolnir, if they be worthy, powers of Thor as a mantle thing that hadn't really been dealt with since the Lee and Kirby had retconned the secret identity away, a workout via the character of Beta Ray Bill, an alien superhero who became an alien version of Thor when he picked up Mjolnir and proved worthy of not only lifting the hammer but using its powers, than anyone had in a while. And because Thor is a person, but that person is also a god and or godlike being that exists as a power set and position in the Asgardian hierarchy according to the original version of the origin, even though that was kind of a trick being played on him specifically by his dad. Now, does that make sense to you? Really? Well, then so might the very long and very drawn-out and portentous death and rebirth of the Gods storyline that dominated the Thor comics of the early 2000s, primarily for the purpose of keeping him from serving as the easy fix for the mostly earthbound hero versus hero storylines that dominated the Civil War-era Marvel Universe. It was convoluted and basically led to a reset for the character, Donald Blake, Jane Foster, and all, but part of the reveal was confirming that the Asgardians are locked in a kind of perpetual death and rebirth cycle, reflecting the Norse End of Days story, which reinforces the concept of inheritance and transfer for their identities and titles if you needed that extra justification. Anyway, fast forward to 2014, and during the otherwise largely forgettable Original Sin storyline, Thor lost his powers by becoming unworthy of Mjolnir for the umpteenth time, and the mantle of Thor was this time transferred to a woman, and it turned out to be Jane Foster, which was a big surprise because at this point Jane Foster was in chemotherapy for cancer treatment, and while using the Thor powers held the disease at bay, she eventually had to transform back every time, and whenever she did, the cancer had always accelerated, which meant there was a lethal ticking clock on her ability to save the world. Now, during this period of the storylines, Thor, the original, who has in fact decided himself that he was unworthy, declared Thor to be a title that now belonged to Jane and started calling himself Odin's son instead. And since this is actually a pretty recent storyline still, and this episode is already way too goddamn long, you can go find out how that wrapped up on yourself. I thought it was pretty good. Oh, and none of this is exactly without precedent either. It was inspired by an issue of What If from the 70s where Jane found the hammer and instead of Donald Blake, and became a female Thor called Thordis. Decent story, weird ending involving Odin marrying girl Thor and Donald Blake becoming regular Thor anyway. Very strange. How's it gonna work in the movie? The hell if I know, considering how quickly this was announced and came together, I doubt they've got it 100% cracked in the screenplay as it is. Given that it's Taika Waititi and the Ragnarok team again, I doubt they'll be going for the same high melodrama that the comics version did. I mean, taking Thor too seriously is what drove the series off the road in the first place. Ragnarok righted the ship by going full action comedy. Portman herself was much more at home doing reactive romantic comedy vibes in the first Thor than imperiled princess stuff in Dark World. I have to imagine it'll be more like, whoa, I've got powers, what do I even do with these physical comedy hijinks? She'll get all shredded and in shape for some badass girl power fight scenes, sure. I don't think she'll be Valkyrie's queen, but maybe they'll like flirt with the idea. Maybe that's where Angela's gonna come in, or we'll get a Captain Marvel appearance. Maybe the love part in the title means Enchantress is the villain. A lot of things can happen here. Whatever, it's a Marvel movie, so it's probably gonna be either good to very good, make $1 billion either way. And even if I don't like it, it's gonna take a lot for me not to look forward to Natalie Portman with an MMA bod wailing on people in fantasy armor. So yeah, Thor. It's a guy's name. It's a title. It can be both things. And either way, at the end of Endgame, Thor basically made Valkyrie the new Odin, so I think she can just like decide whoever gets called what. The D23 Expo has concluded. Black Widow has a poster, 3 new Marvel Cinematic Universe connected streaming shows have been announced, Black Panther 2 is dated for 2022, and we know a tiny bit more about what a few of these things are about. And Spider-Man is 2 giant entertainment companies haggling in the press over the price of a decision they don't have to make right away either way, using social media as leverage, so there's no reason for anyone to get all heated about it. And besides, I guess someone let like an actual villain from Captain Planet become president of the rainforest, so we're all kind of f***ed anyway. So how about some
Baseless, algorithm-chasing Marvel speculation!
to keep us all distracted as we ride this Snowpiercer straight into the apocalypse?
Shall I try Miss Potts? Might as well.
Okay, so now we know what Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4, now with TV stuff you actually have to watch, looks like, unless they add another Spider-Man and another Avengers. Lady Prequel, Friends of Steve R, Sexy Rainbow Space People, Sorry About Iron Fist, Not Legion, Oh Yeah, You Never Got a Part 2, Let's Take Care of That, Graphic Design is My Passion, Market Research for Future Projects the Series, a Goofy movie but with Legolas and Katniss, and Natalie is Our Friend Again. But what we don't know is what the big story is. By which I mean by the end of the first Iron Man and Incredible Hulk, people pretty much understood that the vague overarching goal that isn't necessarily a storyline but feels enough like one that you're obligated to follow it was eventually shoving these guys into the Avengers, and then by the end of that movie you kind of got the sense that before everyone was too old enough to keep doing this, they'd all fight whoever the purple guy at the end was. Well, now that's all been handled and the purple guy's been fought and the game is still running, so what's the new reason to keep this going?
Money!
What's the new thing that's going to tie the overarching in-between stuff of all of this together? Well, I think I've got a theory, based solely on information available, the way Marvel has operated in the past, and their general MO so far of borrowing from some of their popular comic book storylines to get fans talking between the movies for free advertising, but also updating those stories to be, comprehensible to regular humans.
I do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
And since I'm trying to keep this to one episode, we're going to cut some corners and compress some details to get this done really, really fast. So, comics are weird, blah, blah, blah. Hit up the Google if you want more specific details, yada, yada. Okay, so the biggest WTF in the lineup by far was WandaVision, because a show about Vision and Scarlet Witch just chilling out happy sounds odd, and also Vision is dead, leading many to speculate that the series would involve some kind of dream or alternate reality time travel, since in the comics, Wanda's very vague and hard to explain and kind of silly powers involve being able to rewrite the fabric of reality itself if she wants to. She and Quicksilver are also raised as babies by a midwife who is an artificially hyper-evolved humanoid cow. Her name is Bova. I don't think you'll need to know that, but aren't you kind of glad you know that now? Anyway, in the comics, when Scarlet Witch and Vision got married, they moved to the suburbs and had 2 kids of their own, even though he's a robot using magic and science because comic book, but it ended up badly because the 2 kids weren't actually real, or rather more unreal than they were supposed to have been, and the devil, like literally the devil, was involved in all of... Look, they changed what was actually going on here a few times retroactively, but basically the kids were blinked out of existence in the end, and this was so traumatic everyone who knew about it agreed it was just best to wipe the whole incident from Wanda's memory and just never bring it up again.
Not a great plan.
No, really, that's how they left it. Someone with the power to end the world by thinking about ending the world has a go-crazy trigger phrase. Everyone just try not to bring it up. This was really stupid, and everyone really did act like it never happened for a few decades. Then in 2004, Wanda remembers her kids and goes crazy, was used as the inciting incident for Avengers Disassembled, which ended the original version of the Avengers and kicked off the entire 21st century Marvel Universe event storyline cycle, including New Avengers, Illuminati, House of M, Civil War, World War Hulk, Secret Invasion, all of it. Like even that thing where Spider-Man made a stupid mind-erasing deal with the devil, that was part of this too. The whole thing. Oh, also House of M was the one that established she can create an alternate universe or multiverse if she wants to. So the fact that the MCU versions of Quicksilver and Vision are both back in some way for WandaVision seems like a pretty clear tell that the series will be doing a Scarlet Witch creates a fake happy ending alternate universe storyline, and that it's probably not going to end well for her, because these things never ever end well for her. And the fact that the series will shortly be followed on the release schedule by Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, in which she's scheduled to be a supporting character, leads me to ask the following question. What if what they're not saying yet is that WandaVision is going to end so badly for the title characters that Wanda isn't just the co-star in Doctor Strange 2, she's the villain? I mean, incidentally, regarding why specifically Wanda's psyche broke down in the comics, Multiverse of Madness is kind of an awkward title, but it's also an acronym. But there's more. We also know more about Falcon and Winter Soldier, which people thought might be about the two guys fighting over Captain America's legacy and who gets the shield, but might be about them fighting about that, but other people over the same thing, because Wyatt Russell is now confirmed to be playing a fan-favorite character named John Walker. In the comics, Walker started out as a kind of right-wing, my country, right or wrong, unquestioningly nationalist wannabe version of Captain America called Super Patriot, but he gets hired by the government to actually replace Steve Rogers as the official real deal Cap during the famous 1980s Captain America No More storyline, because quitting the mantle under Republican presidential administrations that the writers didn't care for is kind of a thing Steve does semi-frequently in the comics, actually. Anyway, when that story ended, Walker continued on as U.S. Agent, basically the bootleg Fox News talk radio version of Captain America. Here's the thing, for obvious reasons, though Walker himself isn't always a full-on villain in the comics, he or some incarnation of U.S. Agent is often the go-to guy for evil version of the Avengers bad guy teams like the Dark Avengers or the Thunderbolts. And while the Dark Avengers replacement team originated as an upgrade of a new Thunderbolts incarnation during one of the event books cascading out of the post-disassembled, post-House of M New Avengers stories, that would take way too long to fully explain, the original Thunderbolts, actually short version on both of those, bad guys pretending to be good guys as a cover for bad guy stuff.
Everybody got that? Good!
First showed up in the aftermath of a different Avengers and also X-Men and Fantastic Four, seemingly destroyed by powerful psychic breaking reality storyline, in the not all that fondly remembered 1990s Onslaught saga, which I'm not explaining again unless it turns out I'm really on the money with this bullshit and like Scarlet Witch is the MCU Onslaught, in which case...
I am so tired.
Yeah, anyway, those first Thunderbolts were a master plan by Baron Helmut Zemo, and Daniel Bruhl is confirmed coming back as his incarnation of Zemo for Falcon and Winter Soldier, in case you forgot that they left that guy alive. So, with Walker, him, and several other still alive villains to work with in this mega franchise, including that guy whose middle name is Thunderbolt, is it possible that the reason we haven't seen an Avengers movie announced for this phase yet is that the twist is actually going to be Avengers 4 being Dark Avengers?
Moment side. Oh, so dark.
Hell, extrapolating even further, a lot of the post-Phase 4 build already being set up has involved younger people as superheroes as opposed to the mainly middle-aged heroes of the first three phases. Hawkeye is about Clint Barton training Kate Bishop, Miss Marvel is a teenager, so is Spider-Man. Now let's be real, they will sort that out and he'll be back in there one way or another. And they've alluded to Cassie Lang getting her father's giant man powers a few times already, so maybe following Dark Avengers in Phase 4 with Young Avengers in Phase 5, and then, like, New Avengers in Phase 6, or maybe Avengers Reassembled would be the most logical second Avengers trilogy. You know, with all the other movies filled in between that. I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense to me. Are you tired of reading and or listening to explainers of whatever new Marvel properties got announced as upcoming movie or TV projects because Disney has decided that this is how the streaming wars are going to get won before they're even started? Well, too bad. Go find the algorithm and tell him you want something else to be the only thing anyone clicks on anymore. Seriously though, every time I start thinking, do I or anyone else need to still do this job anymore? They drop another pile of these announcements and suddenly I'm seeing social media flip out with people getting outraged as to She-Hulk because apparently they think this character who's been around since 1980 is a new thing, who's been thought up because someone is out of ideas or pandering to political correctness, and wow, fine. Guess I'm going back in.
Do we get to win this time?
Your newly announced in-development Marvel Cinematic Universe franchises for Disney Plus, not spun off from the previously seen in the movies characters, are She-Hulk, Moon Knight, and Miss Marvel. Let's get our
Comics are weird
learn on. Okay, let's get this straight. She-Hulk was not created in a purely cynical move to pander to social media trends or business calculations about Mark Ruffalo's long-term movie availability. She was created as a purely cynical move based on business calculations to secure IP rights several decades ago. See, back in the late 70s, Marvel had licensed The Incredible Hulk to CBS as a TV show, which had turned out to be a big hit. If you've seen the show, you know that the only Marvel thing that ever appears in it is the Hulk himself, at least in the original run, because selling off licenses in pieces was how Marvel was planning to maximize profits back in the day, a strategy that would in no way come back to continually bite them in the ass, #Save Spider-Man. Anyway, in the same period, there was another hit sci-fi TV action series on another network called The $6 Million Man, whose producers found unexpectedly huge success spinning off a gender-flipped version of the same premise called The Bionic Woman. Supposedly, Marvel Comics executives saw this and got wary that the producers of the Hulk TV show might do the same thing and create a female version of the Hulk, which they would then own and be able to use and market without having to pay fees to Marvel, since Marvel had no female Hulk character to claim to own. So they had Stan Lee and John Buscema very quickly knock together a character called Savage She-Hulk that would end up being the last original character Lee would help create under his original Marvel tenure. Origin-wise, She-Hulk was really Jennifer Walters, a cousin to Bruce Banner, who was wounded in an assassination attempt, leading Banner to donate blood plasma in order to save her life, which of course causes her to inherit a version of his Hulk abilities. She's not exactly as strong as the Hulk, but she also doesn't undergo as extreme a change in personality. And after several different storylines worth of retooling, writers would eventually settle on the conceit that She-Hulk can transform whenever she wants as opposed to needing a rage trigger, and also that she keeps most of her personality and prefers to just stay as the She-Hulk most of the time because she enjoys being tall, gorgeous, self-confident, and green. Sure, she's been an Avenger, a Defender, a replacement member of the Fantastic Four, a Lady Liberator, and an Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but she also has a regular job. She's a lawyer, which is what a lot of people are hoping the show will be, a Boston legal or suit-style courtroom show, but with superhero stuff. Hell yeah, I'd watch that. I'm mostly curious to know how exactly they're going to do this, since for Marvel so far they've done all the Hulks as CGI motion capture creatures, and that's pretty expensive for a TV budget, even for the kind of money Disney's throwing at Disney+. Will they use the conceit of She-Hulk being different from the Hulk as a rationale to instead hire a very large muscular actress and use makeup instead? Will they not do the She-Hulk all the time part? Also, given the possible legal world setting, maybe this is where we'll see some of the now homeless supporting cast of Daredevil make a return. By now, the no-can-touch timer on the Netflix stuff will have surely run out. Oh, good God, where to start on Moon Knight? Okay, so for a long time the Comics Code Authority thing was so powerful and also so idiosyncratically specific about what was and wasn't okay that you just couldn't have werewolves or zombies in comics, period. You just couldn't. That's why there's so many weird Silver Age creatures that are like certain famous monsters but also not really. Anyway, in the 70s it suddenly became okay to just have regular werewolves again, so Marvel did a book called Werewolf by Night about a guy named Jack Russell, who was a werewolf by night. Anyway, in one issue he fought a hired assassin with silver weapons called the Moon Knight, who turned out to actually be a decent guy and fans liked him, so he got his own book and backstory, which was really confusing. Basically, the Moon Knight is a guy named Mark Spector, who is, deep breath now, a Jewish rabbi's son, heavyweight boxer, former U.S. Marine, mercenary, and sometimes CIA contractor who is betrayed and killed on a mission and revived by worshippers of an ancient Egyptian god called Khonshu, who gives him superhuman powers as his avatar on Earth, which Spectre opts to use to become a superhero because why not? In practical terms, like gear and behavior, he's a lot like a Marvelish Batman, but with the added gimmick of supernatural stuff and having a bunch more secret identities. In addition to himself and the Moon Knight, he also pretends to be a wealthy billionaire art dealer to cover up his funding and a street-level taxi driver persona for detective work undercover. Also, he might just be nuts. A lot of other writers have played around over the years with varying degrees the question of whether or not this really is a guy possessed by an ancient god who dresses up as a superhero and also two other guys, or just a vigilante with dissociative identity disorder. There have been a bunch of different takes on Moon Knight over the years, emphasizing the darker supernatural elements, more conventional nighttime vigilante versions, psychological drama, straightforward superhero. It'll be interesting to see what the plan is for him here in terms of the niche he's meant to fill in the MCU roster. It could really be as simple as, hey, this is as close as we've got to Batman and it comes with a lot less baggage, or it could be something else, because it's certainly not that there's a ton of classic Moon Knight storylines everyone's been waiting to see play out. This is, of course, the big one. When Miss Marvel first showed up, she was, along with the retooled Carol Danvers Captain Marvel, whose original name she inherited and whom she's connected to through various continuity, immediately recognized as an early seed of comic Marvel, setting into its new role as a laboratory proving ground for future movie Marvel multimedia icons. A Pakistani-American teenage heroine who balances the modern 21st century complications of late millennial girlhood, life as a person of color and practicing Muslim confronting American racism and Islamophobia with the life of an up-and-coming superhero who fights not only crime and villainy, but also for change and social justice, may not have looked like the most in-demand stat sheet for a new character in the somewhat narrow sales demographics of traditional comics publishing after all. But it's exactly the kind of new-era character that a globalizing international audience and rapidly diversifying mainstream audience has been demanding and frequently rewarding on film and television. Seen by many comic scholars as being core to the identity of 21st century Marvel as Peter Parker was to its 20th, Kamala Khan has a plucky attitude, shape-changing powers, and a huge fan base that's made her one of the most requested characters for the feature film side of the MCU since she first appeared in 2013, which is why some are a bit surprised to see her starting out on TV instead. I can see where it makes sense, though. For one thing, the reality is that teens and under-center character like this is aimed at a demographic for whom streaming is the main showcase for entertainment. For another, assuming that the series holds to the comics, Kamala's solar storylines would lend themselves a lot better in some respects to the format of a civilian life A-story, superhero B-story TV formula than the big action requirements of a feature film. And as Marvel has been keen on breaking out of the obligatory origin movie format anyway, this would be a way to get all of her setup handled in a long-form friendly platform, allowing her to then turn up fully formed in the movies as a known quantity whose arrival is an event in itself, the way Spider-Man's arrival in Civil War was. So a couple weeks or so back, I did a whole-ass episode about sussing out where I thought the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was going big storyline, overarching, narrative-wise, regarding clues that might connect the plots of WandaVision and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness with unreconciled plot threads from the previous films and several famous comic book storylines from a decade or so ago. I thought at the time that would be the end of the clue hunting and speculating until there was new stuff to actually watch, but then I noticed a thing and suddenly a bunch of maybe-could-be stuff clicked into place about the Eternals and Shang-Chi, so here we go again.
Comics are weird!
So nobody has really gone on the record about what the Eternals is supposed to be about, other than the Eternals themselves, who are ancient superhumans originating on Earth, but then mainly operating in the cosmic plane after that, whose origins are tied to godlike aliens interfering in the evolution of humanity.
I'm not hallucinating. It's happening.
We have to go now. We need to save the world.
The Horde will cleanse this galaxy of the disease called life. No!
We serve life. We guard the earth. We preserve and we maintain.
Who are you?
We are Eternals.
More precisely, no one has nailed down why this obscure, never really popular, esoteric hard sell of a property is getting a prime release spot in Angelina Jolie on the marquee. Well, I think it might be this. The one thing that is seemingly confirmed is that at least part of the film takes place millions of years or more in the past, without trying to fully explain the Eternals comics, because we'll just have to do it again later anyway, and it's very confusing.
Thousands of years ago, before the dawn of man as we knew him, there was...
Basically, the reason they're still kicking around in the comics despite never having been popular is because their origins were big idea enough that it became an easy fix to retcon a lot of different where did this come from stuff in the Marvel Universe to be connected to them, including the Inhumans, the various actual gods, I think even the Mutants are in there now. Oh, Thanos technically is an Eternal himself, but who knows if that's even going to come up.
Where did that bring you? Back to me.
Anyway, the relevant thing is they're older than human history. The main crew that's starring in the movie come and go from Earth over the centuries, but at a certain point they have to come back and get actively involved in the Marvel superhero bullshit in the present because someone uncovers and starts mucking with their ancient alien stuff. Oh, there's also bad ones called deviants, but we're moving on. So, the subtitle to Shang-Chi, Shang-Chi is a guy who does kung fu. He does kung fu extremely well, and that's pretty much it, thank God.
What do you think?
I think it's lunchtime.
We have a winner!
Is Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, in the MCU, the Ten Rings refers to the terrorist group that kidnaps Tony Stark in the first Iron Man, but the name Ten Rings was an Easter egg referring to Iron Man's problematically, culturally insensitive comic book nemesis, the Mandarin, an evil Chinese science wizard whose powers come from his 10 magical rings. He wears one on each finger, each has its own scary superpower. Bookmark that for a couple minutes from now. A version of the Mandarin was revealed to be a hoax in Iron Man 3, which, by the way, is still like my favorite twist of this entire whole thing, and I love that character, and I really hope Trevor comes back at some point.
They approached me about the role,
and they knew about the drugs.
What did they say? They'd get you off them?
Said they'd give me more. Look around you, costumes, green screen. Honestly, I wasn't on location for half of this stuff. When I was, it was movie magic club.
But a DVD-exclusive short subject about that character later implied that a real Mandarin did in fact control the MCU 10 Rings and was still at large, and now Hong Kong superstar Tony Leung Chiu-wai has signed to play that Mandarin as the villain of Shang-Chi, likely because Shang-Chi's original comic book gimmick of having the classic pulp character Dr. Fu Manchu as both his father and arch-nemesis is something they can't do anymore, both because of copyrights lapsing and also because racism.
Of course, in your hands, these things will be merely interesting archaeological specimens to go into the British Museum. But should Fu Manchu put that mask across his wicked eyes and take that scimitar into his bony, cruel hands, all Asia rises. He'll declare himself Genghis Khan come to life again, and he'll lead hundreds of millions of men to sweep the world. And that, my friend, is what you have got to prevent. You must find that grave.
What does that have to do with the Eternals? Well, in the comics, the Mandarin isn't actually a wizard, and the 10 Rings aren't magic. They're ancient but super advanced alien technology.
A bolt of unknown energy seared my lungs and surged into my brains. My mind exploded, my strength growing with every breath. The path to predestined greatness was now clear before me. I knew what I had to do. Mystic gems from an alien world. Through their power, I was reborn as the Mandarin.
Yeah, so that version, that comes from the 90s Iron Man cartoon, which was, if you've never seen it, definitely a little bit extra. Say, how many of the ancient alien Eternals are in the principal cast of The Eternals? 10. There are 10 of them.
Ah, that's it, you're number 10! Ha ha! 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. I'm a 10! I'm a 10! Oh, finally, the 10 chunk is broken!
So, assuming the Mandarin did name the 10 Rings after his 10 actual rings, do the rings belong to the Eternals, maybe? Did they lose them? Are they looking for them? Are they themselves the rings somehow? And regardless of the answer, does that mean that these are going to be this decade of Marvel movies' version of the Infinity Stones for everyone to chase around and pretend like they matter? And to think some of you who follow my social media question why I tend to rise and sleep on LA time despite residing on the East Coast. Last night at midnight Pacific Standard Time, Disney Marvel finally showed a Black Widow trailer to people who weren't in Hall H at Comic-Con last year. I was, yes, there was a lot in there that's not in here, but vice versa. So let's start December with a bang and poke about in the vinyl jumpsuited, newly revealed details of the film that follows Avengers Endgame's answer to the question of what did the first female Avenger have to do to get a movie to herself with die?
Do you know what the Bechdel test is?
The what?
For God's sake, Morty, the formula for measuring female agency in a story proposed by lesbian cartoonist Allison. What the hell are they teaching you in that school?
Other stuff!
Then you've killed us both!
Well, okay, it technically supposedly had more to do with Scarlett Johansson needing to first exhaust the full complement of non-leading appearances she'd been under contract for originally before they could bump her screen time up without needing to renegotiate, but okay, here's however much of a taste Disney has determined is not a fair use violation.
So what are you going to do?
I've lived a lot of lives.
Okay, looks fun. Back to Winter Soldier territory, but more of a scrappy, run-down, shabby Russian Eastern European feel, dirty hand-to-hand combat, morally ambiguous spy stuff, callbacks, gunfights, and Marvel flexing that we follow the zeitgeist that we also control muscle with, oh, you like chubby Thor? You're gonna love really out-of-shape but somehow also jacked as hell Stranger Things guy as communist Captain America. Look at this guy. I fucking love him already. He looks like he's gonna fight a whole bunch of dudes and then go co-host a podcast where he explains why this movie is neoliberal accelerationist propaganda. Alright, so unless there's some kind kind of reality-bending twist waiting for us? I hope not. That would feel a bit like cheating to me. Obviously, all or most of this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe first seriously back-reaching prequel in like forever, likely loaded up with flashbacks of some sort going back even further than that since Black Widow is dead, which I think everyone was expecting, but it also looks like it's not as far back as a lot of people had expected. See, for a long time the assumption was that this would take place before all the other Marvel movies except the first Captain America, and be all about the repeatedly mentioned Budapest incident that's been in her backstory from when she was apparently a villain working for the Russian government or whoever, but the appearance in the trailer by William Hurt's General Ross suggests at least part of this is happening closer to recently, and in fact it apparently takes place between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, which is interesting. Now, it's a teaser trailer, so there's not much of a sense of plot other than something bad is happening somewhere, it's connected to Natasha's origin and past, so she has to reconnect with what appears to have been a possibly earlier Russian-backed, costumed and/or nicknamed super-person spy espionage team that she was a part of and has seemingly disbanded and gone a bit to seed, and that's where we get the character introductions.
What brings you home?
Now that's Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova. In the comics, Yelena was the second Black Widow. Explaining how that works we'll wait for another time, or not at all, because her backstory is convoluted, retconville, and really kinda dumb, and it's widely expected that having her in this film is basically foundation laying for Pugh, who's just having one of the all-time great young actress breakout years. She was also in Fighting With My Family, Midsommar, and Little Women before this, to take over the identity and slip into Johansson's now vacated pleather body glove in the present-day timeline MCU going forward. So we'll see about that.
Sure.
Okay, this is supposedly our villain, but this is a Marvel movie with spy stuff going on, so there's a strong possibility that the bad guy you recognize from comics is not the main villain, but rather a red herring henchman to something bigger and hypothetically more interesting, though for what it's worth there was a lot more of this person in the Comic-Con footage. Whatever, it's a teaser. But for now, this is the Taskmaster, and I've been waiting for a long time for him to show up. Taskmaster is one of the goofiest looking, so hats off for even trying to get that outfit to work. Villains in Marvel Comics, but also a mainstay because he's got a great gimmick. Otherwise, just a regular human, Taskmaster's one cool ability is photographic reflexes, which means all he needs to do is observe a physical action being performed by another person clearly enough to grasp the basic motor functions behind it, and he can copy it exactly, using complicated tools, playing musical instruments, picking locks, martial arts, weapon skills, anything he sees you do, he can do exactly as well, including outclass Master Swordsman, outshoot Hawkeye. He can even catch and throw Captain America's vibranium shield. That's such a great concept. Funny thing, no one knows who's playing this character yet. Ray Winstone and Olivia Richters are in the film in yet-to-be-revealed roles, but it doesn't look like Winstone is in this costume, and Richters is a Dutch fitness pro known as the world's tallest bodybuilder. He's 7'2", and in the trailer it looks like in a hand-to-hand fight, Taskmaster is the same size as David Harbour, who's a foot shorter, so probably not him. So put a pin in that for now.
Still fits.
David Harbour as Alexei Shoskotov, aka Red Guardian. So basically Captain Russia, yeah. Not exactly an important character on the comic side, mainly noteworthy in that he was Black Widow's husband at one point. Don't know if they'll do that in the movie. Probably, maybe. Here, though, he looks pretty much instantly iconic. You can tell why people liked him immediately as soon as the trailer dropped. Like, you kind of get the sense this character isn't meant to survive the movie under normal circumstances, but unless he's the surprise real bad guy, definite possibility, you can tell this is the Groot of the movie and that people are going to want him back. So guess we'll find out.
Gonna be a hell of a reunion. You got fat.
And there's Rachel Weisz playing Melina. Supposedly she was Black Widow before Natasha, which if so will establish that this is a whole legacy thing. We've seen the whole Red Room Russian murder ballerina academy thing a la Red Sparrow and Age of Ultron already. There's shots in the trailer of another version with adult women in what looked like Telltale. This is supposed to be the 70s haircuts, and the World War II era origins of the Black Widow Red Room Soviet spy girl project was part of the plot in the Agent Carter TV miniseries. Whatever the plot of this is, I'm betting it has to do with Natasha and the rest of these people having been altered or experimented on in various ways to make them super soldiers, a la Captain America. I mean, Red Guardian clearly is just Soviet model Captain America, and maybe something went wrong like it usually does. Maybe there's a monster guy, and that's what they needed this actual giant for, and this contemporary action is all about stopping what looks like Hydra or a Hydra-adjacent operation, which is what these armored guys look like from starting it up again. Anyway, as concerns Taskmaster, here's my wild guess until we know more. I bet it's Rachel Weisz under the helmet. Mainly because that would be cool, and mentor-student stuff is kind of classic in these things, but also everyone knows that, hey, everyone, sorry it took us like a decade to give the one female Avenger her own movie, and then killing her right before that, we're gonna do better, we promise, is kind of an unspoken thing hanging over this whole project. So it'd be very on-brand for Marvel, the overcompensating divorced weekend dad of playing social justice catch-up, to go with, okay, let's have this sick-ass armor, ace with every weapon ever, unbeatable awesomeness machine of a character just tear through the movie, owning the shit out of everybody, and then for the big final masks off its personal fight, the helmet pops off all Metroid style, and it's like, no way! The person kicking all the asses has been the 49-year-old two-time Academy Award-winning star of The Favorite and Disobedience this whole time? My mind has been blown and my expectations realigned. Oh, and some fans think the character's unconfirmed last name will be Vostokov, and in the comics, Melina Vostokov was an evil female version of Iron Man called Iron Maiden, so there's that. I kind of hope this is the case, actually. I think it would be fun.
Baseless, algorithm-chasing, Marvel speculation!
Yep, you know the drill by now. Marvel movies. Big secrets coming up, whole new phase, new heroes, new villains, what's gonna happen? Who the hell knows? Here's some wild predictions and/or well-thought-out educated guesses. Which one's a which? We don't know yet. Guess you'll have to keep coming back and watching this video once every couple of weeks to check, causing it to be profitable for months, if not years on end. Funny how that works out. Anyway... This one feels kind of obvious, right? For a refresher, when Marvel's deal with Netflix ended almost 2 years ago with the slow death cancellation of all the various Marvel Netflix series as the Marvel TV enterprises were gradually folded back into the broader Marvel Productions singularity that is now wholly overseen, comics, movies, TV, all of it, as a single entity by Kevin Feige, it was established that the contract rules prevented the studio from releasing any new productions with the characters licensed to that division for about 2 years without Disney making a big payout to Netflix, which was not going to happen because other than the prospect of Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin maybe being in a Spider-Man movie or the Punisher being anywhere, nobody really seemed to care after the Defenders turned out to be a bust. But now the clock is almost up, and there was nothing preventing them from making plans, so it feels like a foregone conclusion that some of these characters, if not necessarily the original actors, might pop up again. Probably not Luke Cage anytime soon, since Mike Coulter has a new TV gig, and probably not Iron Fist, because why would you remind people that you made Iron Fist? But another strong superheroine, all-purpose criminal mastermind guy, easily Marvel's second or third most merchandise-friendly logo, plus guns, yeah, they're probably going to want those back. Okay, shortest possible version of this. Angela was a character from Todd McFarlane's Spawn comic books published in the 90s by Image. She was created by author Neil Gaiman while guest writing an issue of Spawn and later became one of the central pieces of intellectual property in a series of lawsuits between Gaiman and McFarlane that was largely a proxy war over rights to an older work Gaiman had produced for a series called Miracle Man that McFarlane claimed to have purchased at a bankruptcy auction and allegedly tried to use as leverage to renege on original agreements made to Gaiman about the rights to his work and characters on Spawn.
Everybody got that?
Gaiman eventually won those lawsuits, in part through the intervention of a business partnership with Marvel Comics to jointly help secure the Miracle Man rights, and shortly thereafter gifted the character of Angela to Marvel, seemingly as a take that to McFarlane. She was granted a new backstory as another of Thor and Loki's long-lost half-siblings, and has been a frequent fixture of Cosmic Marvel since, so wouldn't be shocked to see her in the next Thor, or the next Guardians of the Galaxy, or Eternals, or whatever. Everyone knows Marvel's going to do Fantastic Four again sooner or later, and everybody knows possibly the biggest reason to do it isn't even to get the Four themselves in the MCU, but to get their principal nemesis in there. Victor Von Doom is one of the ultimate Marvel bad guys. He goes with everything and everybody. He just needs to be. So who's to say he doesn't show up before the good guys do? Traditionally, Doom has already been doing his metal-faced totalitarian ruler of Latveria thing for quite a while before his old college rival Reed Richards becomes the world-famous leader of a superhero team, so it might honestly make more sense to get the here's the evil guy, his country, and all the geopolitical things around that out of the way in some other spot before the Richards family actually shows up to get involved with him. It would be a swerve, but they've swerved before. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was a much bigger deal than Sony or Marvel expected it to be, and it's getting a 2022 sequel that's expected to take its multiverse concept even further than last time, introducing even more alternate dimension Spider-Man, including apparently the 1970s Japanese live-action TV version.
스파이더맨 체인지 레포르동 소더비타.
Here's the prospect that interests me most, though. This will be hitting not even a year after the Marvel-Disney side of things has gone through 3 different high-profile projects, What If, WandaVision, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, all purporting to deal with multiverse concepts of their own. Tom Holland, the live-action MCU Spider-Man, has been very keen on several occasions about the concept of appearing in a Spider-Verse sequel as his Peter Parker, alongside Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire even, an idea that was apparently teased in some capacity for the first one. Now, if they did that along with being fun, it would establish Spider-Verse and all of its myriad multiverses as canon to the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well, theoretically opening an easy door to future films to make easier use of characters like Spider-Gwen, Spider-Man Noir, Olivia Octavius, and of course Miles Morales. Keep in mind, Holland is already widely expected to make an appearance in Venom 2, establishing that series as partial canon later this year, and appear as potentially his final Marvel Sony Spider-Man solo feature in 2021, 1 year ahead of Spider-Verse 2. Okay, look, at least one of these has to be me going out on a weird limb or it's going to be cheating, okay? Alright, so I have no special insight for the inner workings of Disney and casting, but supposedly Adam Sandler took a meeting at Marvel at some point recently. Not really noteworthy thing, everyone takes meetings with Marvel, it's the biggest thing in town. But what could they have wanted him for? Who the hell can say, except that Sandler generally doesn't do projects outside his own company now, unless he really wants to, and for work-intensive long contract gigs like Marvel asks for, it'd probably be a supporting role, ideally something in motion capture or just a voiceover that he wouldn't always have to be on set for, is my way of thinking. So, what in Marvel fits that criteria for which they'd be actively courting a middle-aged, Generation X, East Coast Jewish stand-up comedian, best known for being sarcastic, loud, angry, but also doing funny voices that entertain children? Who could it be? Maybe someone with some kind of catchphrase? It's a mystery. Yeah, like I said, it's a bit of a reach, but if I'm right, it's going to be really impressive, and you know it. Okay, the backstory here is really complicated, but to keep it basic, sometimes when Bruce Banner turns into the Hulk in the wrong kind of mood or under the wrong circumstance, the Hulk's physical form and psychology are different. One of those different forms is the Grey Hulk, whose skin is gray, isn't as big or strong as the green version, but, still pretty big and strong, has more of a Frankenstein thing happening with his face, and is a little bit smarter than the conventional me-smash Hulk, but also kind of a selfish, amoral dick. So, instead of doing superhero stuff, Grey Hulk mostly uses his abilities to become a rich and powerful mob enforcer named Joe Fixit in Las Vegas. No, for real, that's the Grey Hulk story. He gambles, he whacks guys, he gets all kinds of money, puts on Hulk-sized Armani suits, scores with strippers. Doesn't that sound fun? Don't you want to see Mark Ruffalo do this movie? That would be amazing. Anyway, supposedly they've got the rights to make a solo Hulk movie again, and if they do that, the only 3 things you kind of have to do with the Hulk while you got him are fight the Thing, fight Wolverine, and this. So they've kind of got to do this, right? So if Marvel does have the Hulk solo rights back, then they've also got Namor the Submariner, because those two come together for some reason. If so, expect to see him, because they were already dropping hints about underwater stuff in Infinity War. He's a fan-favorite character, and for some reason, China can't get enough of movies about underwater stuff. No, really, that's a whole thing. I don't really know what the cultural reason for it is, but it's a thing. So I'm sure he'll turn up. Probably not in a solo feature, because Aquaman was already done, but he does work just as well as a villain, too, so you got that. Plus, it's an excuse to get an attractive male actor into a Speedo for an entire movie, and Marvel has pretty much mastered the how to get people's moms to go see action movies thing. Marvel has said they aren't doing another Avengers movie for a while, which makes sense because they've got other team-up crossover things to pivot to, and because it's smart to make people miss the Avengers as a concept, so you can make it a huge deal when you inevitably bring it back, but I don't think they'll be able to avoid having at least the word Avengers attached to something, and Young Avengers feels like a pretty good title. Plus, there's going to be a bunch of youngish characters set to show up between Spider-Man, Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, Shuri. There's places you can take that, and Avengers, but this time they're all teenagers, is pretty self-explanatory as a pitch. Speaking of which, is there an Avengers now? It seems like there might not be. Iron Man, Vision, and Black Widow are dead, Captain America's an old guy, Falcon and Winter Soldier have their own TV series worth of troubles to deal with, Hawkeye is training a replacement at some point, I guess, so we might be Avengers-less at present, and still without a Fantastic Four or an X-Men. When that happened one time in the comics, the void ended up being filled with suspicious quickness by a new team called the Thunderbolts, who showed up out of nowhere with a big secret that only the readers knew about at first. They were actually a team of B and C-list bad guys from across the Marvel pantheon pretending to be good guys so they could do crimes and mess with people, while all the real good guys were indisposed. Good idea for a comic? Yes. Great idea for a movie? Also yes. More on the predictive side, their leader in the original series, Baron Zemo, is due to get out of solitary as part of the plot of Falcon and Winter Soldier, and oh yeah, William Hurt is still hanging around as that guy whose middle name is Thunderbolt. So, because of how long ago his stories were written, Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian is a public domain character, kinda. See, Conan is, and the original Conan short stories are, but the character and concept are trademarked by the inheritors of Howard's estate also, so they get to make deals for who has the rights to publish new Conan books, Conan comics, produce Conan movies, develop Conan video games, etc., and those rights have changed hands a lot because Conan is consistently popular, but not like that popular. So there's also rights issues with ancillary characters and mythos attached to all the different versions there have been, like Red Sonja, who was sort of based on a Howard Conan Lady Barbarian, but is technically an original character to Roy Thomas, Conan comic book continuity originally published by Marvel but then transferred to Dark Horse, and now back with Marvel again as of a few years ago because they wanted it badly. Like, if you hadn't been following this, Marvel and Disney decided they wanted to make Conan comics again in a major way a couple years ago. They shelled out big for the rights, they made Conan in the Marvel Universe adjacent version of Conan's not super well-defined continuity a central fixture of multiple big crossover events, and even made a whole new special Avengers team just to put Conan on it, and the other members were, I shit you not, Wolverine, Venom, Elektra, and the Punisher.
Well, I'm glad I finally got a literal demonstration of overkill.
She is exactly the right amount of kill.
Really. Now, again, Conan is well known, but he's not exactly a gigantic IP, and other than Conan himself, the brand is more concept than content. Despite being almost a century old, its actual major successes encompass one hit movie, one kinda popular 90s cartoon, and the initial run of Marvel comics from the 70s, which didn't really last that long. Even the original stories weren't widely popular until they were republished in paperback decades after Howard's death, and a lot of that may have been about the Frank Frazetta artwork used for the covers. So why is Marvel working so hard to make Conan happen this time? My hunch is someone at Disney said, we need an answer to Game of Thrones, The Witcher, and whatever Amazon is doing with that Lord of the Rings show, so make that barbarian guy you kind of own part of cool again and start reminding everyone he's friends with the Avengers so we can use him in a year or two. So yeah, I'm calling it. Conan will be back in theaters again as a Marvel Disney thing. Wouldn't that be something? So, the X-Men movies were the MCU before the MCU was the MCU, and because it hadn't been done before, and also because the X-Men comics and various animated adaptations preceding the films were so widely known by the general public compared to the other Marvel characters at the time, both mainstream audiences and fans were pretty lenient about a lot of it for a lot longer than it probably deserved. I.e., folks, come on now, only 3 of these are actually good. I guess you can toss in the first 2 if you want to apply a for their time qualifier, and the 2 Deadpools if we're going to grandfather those in as well. The rest of them are just outright bad, and even in the good ones, only 3 or 4 of the actors ever got to be consistently interesting, and only First Class bothered to try and look visually appealing. And all of this is without even mentioning the Bryan Singer thing, which casts kind of an ugly shadow over the whole. Boy, it sure is cool that there was all this strongly embedded pro-LGBTQ youth culture subtext in a mainstream superhero franchise aspect that was among the more positive parts of all of this. That really sucks, honestly, because I know a whole lot of people for whom that was a really formative thing about this series, and now it has this big asterisk on it, and yeah, awful. Just awful stuff. I don't even have a joke there. Anyway, the whole thing ended with a whimper, and Disney bought Fox out, so now the X-Men and all of the mutant stuff is coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a reboot, but nobody knows exactly when or how, other than probably soon, because this sound might as well be a cash register opening. Do I know anything you don't? Probably not, but I do have predictions. New Mutants the comic was a book Marvel did when someone noticed that the X-Men series had strayed way the hell away from the whole teenagers at a school concept it was originally based around, and realized they could just put new kids in the school and get a whole new book. The New Mutants movie was the last X-Men spin-off that escaped into actual production before Fox ceased to be its own thing and shut the franchise down, and has been sitting, apparently finished, in creative limbo for like 3 years now, some speculating that it would never come out heavily re-edited, as this was meant to be a potentially MCU-unfriendly horror film rather than a straightforward superhero adventure, or get unceremoniously dumped onto streaming because who cares at this point, perhaps with all mention of mutants or the X-Men pulled out of it. Instead, it now turns out it's not only going to theaters, but that it's apparently doing so in the form of its director's original cut, with the horror elements, mutant plot points intact, and the Marvel banner, though not Marvel Studios, up front. So clearly, someone at Disney Marvel at least thinks this is decent-ish, since they've honestly got more incentive to have put original curiosity items like this on Disney Plus than they do to drop a potential go-nowhere non-tentpole into theaters. So, prediction number 1, there will be some light sprinklings of business in this that will allow it to retroactively be rendered canonical to whatever bigger plans there are for the MCU, X-Men, and mutant movies going forward if it turns out to be a hit and people like the characters. And if they don't, it's not like they haven't fixed these kinds of problems before.
Odin's treasures.
Fake.
This is kind of the million-dollar question, right? There's well over 1,000 noteworthy mutant characters in the Marvel Comics canon. Only a handful can fit on an X-Men team at a given time. Who do you put in the first wave of movies, since that kind of says a lot about where your head is going to be at direction-wise, at least in theory? What I'd predict when it comes from Marvel Studios as currently constituted is that when they announce the new X-Men team, they'll tell everyone who's on there all at once. They'll be older teenagers or college kids on the younger side, like in the original Lee and Kirby comics. They'll do versions of the blue and/or black and gold uniforms. And most importantly, the lineup will probably be close to the original classic team. So Professor X, Cyclops, Iceman, Jean Grey, Angel, and Beast. Probably already have Beast in his blue fuzzy monkey look because it's cooler and better known, and also feels like a safe bet that not everyone will be white this time. Iceman almost certainly will be out of the closet from the get-go, since that's been a thing in the comics for a while now, and even though 5 is a pretty decent number, I guess they might add a few other fan favorites like Gambit, Nightcrawler, Jubilee, or maybe Colossus and the 2 girls from Deadpool, or one or more of the New Mutants characters if that does end up being canonized. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but I feel like classic foot forward is the way they'll end up going, because Marvel under Kevin Feige loves to lead with, oh my god, they got that thing and that other thing exactly right up front before they start in the direction of substantive change-ups and rebuilds. One other adjacent thing I feel sure of, i.e. classic team first, probably no Wolverine in the first one, or if there is, it'll be the bad guy Weapon X version, and he'll be a final mini-boss henchman they have to fight, and it'll be a brief surprise cameo thing that's not in any of the trailers. That, or a post-credits thing. Or, just not at all in the first one. Either way, they're gonna make you wait on Wolverine, because they know they can afford to, and that they need to get him exactly right. This has always been one of the big hypotheticals about how it would work if and when they ever came time to do Marvel X-Men movies. Where do the mutants come from? In the comics and the original movies, mutants have just always been around, and at a certain point in the late 20th century, there's a bigger movement for them to be out in the open because reasons. But the MCU has already shown us events from a bunch of different time periods, and mutants haven't come up at all. According to some fans, when the X-Men do arrive, there's going to have to be some kind of continuity-altering explanation, therefore, about where they came from and why no one has said anything, or they'll end up being some kind of brand new phenomenon. Now, myself, I really hope that's not the case in either respect. I don't predict it will be either, mainly because spending any large amount of time on origins for mutants in the Marvel Universe kind of runs counter to the entire reason Stan Lee and Jack Kirby came up with mutants in the first place, i.e. to not have to write origin stories. They're a mutant, they were just born like this, was supposed to just let books like X-Men get right to the point, so why mess with that? Sure, I assume since we're getting Eternals right around the corner, the later retcon of the X gene variable being a remnant of celestial genetic experiments on prehistoric humans will get referenced as a general handwave for mutation and a dozen other things just like it does in the comics, and I wouldn't be shocked if Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's origins get retroactively reworked into actually they were mutants and didn't know it and the Hydra experiments merely unlocked their powers, but otherwise I imagine it'll be more like mutants. It just hasn't come up before, but we've been here the whole time, just like how the Ancient One was helping fight the Chitauri in the first Avengers, you just didn't see her, and if you're thinking that hard about this stuff, you may have forgotten that one of our main characters is a talking space raccoon. Something a little more bold and specific? Okay, setting aside the current unknowable canon status of the New Mutants characters, I think it's likely we'll see other new characters who are mutants, popping up individually before a full-on proper X-Men movie. And I don't mean like every X-Man gets a movie and then they team up Avengers style. I mean various mutants will turn up, acclimating us to the concept in various other Marvel movies en route to the debut of a full-blown X-Men team. P.S. This also means I'd expect to see characters and concepts strongly associated with the X-Men who aren't technically mutants show up on their own as well. Maybe like the Brood, the Starjammers, or the Shi'ar Empire turn up in Guardians of the Galaxy, or the Eternals, or Captain Marvel. Maybe Professor Xavier's stepbrother Kane Marco, aka the Juggernaut, would finally get his proper origin story, where instead of being just another mutant, his superhuman powers come from a magic gem and an ancient demon god related to the Doctor Strange mythos. But, you want me to stick my neck out for an even more specific example? Okay. Alright, so for those not aware, Storm's original backstory in the X-Men comics is that she's from a village in a remote country in Africa, where as a child her powers were mistaken for supernatural, and she was regarded as, depending on what point this is being retold, either a goddess, a high priestess, a shaman, etc., until Xavier tracks her down as a young adult, explains the situation, and invites her to come to upstate New York and be bossed around by himself and Cyclops, which she agrees to for some reason. Later on, they retconned in a history and then romantic history between her and Black Panther to do a wedding storyline, but even if they hadn't, this sort of feels like something that would come up organically, doesn't it? Hey, King T'Challa, there's a white-haired lady who can fly and control the weather. A couple countries over next door. You kind of committed to not being isolationist at the end of the first movie, so probably something we gotta go look into, right? And let's be real, if they drop the trailer for Black Panther 2 with, oh shit, that's Storm, as a big surprise, or if when the movie comes out she's the post-credits scene, people are gonna go nuts. Or if it takes that long and it happens for Black Panther 3 for that matter. Here's another one that's going out on a limb, but I feel pretty good about. In the original comics, Rogue started out as a villain, and specifically as the sidekick of Mystique, and as in the live-action movies, her power set was exclusively draining the energy out of people and short-term stealing powers from other mutants and superheroes. So how come the at one point better-known and liked by fans version from the 90s cartoon could also fly and had superhuman strength? Well, because also in the comic, Rogue had fought Miss Marvel, aka Carol Danvers, pre-Captain Marvel, and stolen enough of her powers to keep them permanently. Long story. So I imagine this is pretty self-explanatory. Carol fights two or more female nemesis who are more than a match for her, and Carol loses her powers and has to grapple with being heroic as a normal human again, are both pretty solid A and B storylines for a Captain Marvel sequel, and also Rogue and Mystique are, respectively, two of the most popular and recognized X-Men characters. That's a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. Okay, realistically, you're probably not going to find another actor who can hit the person every fanboy wanted because they'd heard of them and they look like the drawings, and also is a good actor sweet spot for Professor X the way Patrick Stewart did. You're just not. And while as of J.K. Simmons reclaiming his role as J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man Far From Home, it's apparently no longer verboten to just recast the same actors in new continuities, Patrick Stewart is also now committed to who knows how many seasons of playing Picard again, so I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to need to get a new actor, and that means they're probably going to have to confront a difficult question that wasn't widely discussed when they cast the role the first time, but is now. Over the last year, a mounting controversy in the film and theater world has broken through into the mainstream, largely in regards to criticism of prominent roles played by Bryan Cranston and Eddie Redmayne, over whether or not it's appropriate to cast able-bodied actors to play characters with physical disabilities. For the most part, the question is centered on issues of employment, representation, and fairness. It's already difficult enough for disabled actors to be cast as characters who aren't written as disabled or not in the script, so it could be argued that it's pretty shitty to also pass them over when the character is written with their actual disability on the page to begin with, as is the case with the wheelchair-bound Charles Xavier. But other disabled activists have gone so far as to compare the practice to whitewashing and even blackface minstrel performance. Now honestly, I don't know that I'm qualified to weigh in on this question one way or the other, but when it comes time to cast the part, you can bet Disney will have to deal with this, and I imagine it's going to be a difficult, not at all quiet discussion, but probably also an important one. In case you forgot that Marvel Disney is going to make at least one more Deadpool movie with Ryan Reynolds was technically the first X-Men related project that was officially greenlit after the Fox acquisition, which makes a lot of sense. Nobody knows what Deadpool 3 is going to be about other than probably not X-Force, because nobody seems to really want that, and they did spend a whole big part of Deadpool 2 pointing out that X-Force is stupid. Of course, what a lot of fans would like to see is Deadpool interacting with their favorite Marvel characters in the Deadpool kind of way, which is somewhat difficult because that generally ends with said characters violently killed, and some of the favorites are no longer around to begin with. And even pulling a multiverse gag like Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe did in the comics is probably too dark for the films. A compromise possibility, though, use Deadpool as a conduit by which to mess around in a version of the Marvel Zombies universe, a series of books that are kind of dumb but average out on the fun side, and the premise of which I imagine needs little to no explanation. The characters, or at least the costumes and names you know, but zombies. They're already introducing this concept as one of the What If anthology shorts, and I feel like if Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is actually about visiting alternate timelines, that might be one of the ones that we see, but either way, you know, I'd watch this, wouldn't you? Alright, they're gonna get a new actor to play Wolverine. Just accept it. Hugh Jackman was good, but he put in his time, he's not getting any younger, he closed it out on a high note with Logan, and even if it's kind of odd that his movie star persona is defined by a character who wasn't really in that many actual good movies and then got his curtain call in a weird sort of pseudo-sequel, pseudo-commentary on the franchise itself, I mean, that last shot, goddamn, come on.
I did not cry when my own father was hung for stealing a pig, but I'll cry now.
But okay, here's the thing. I bet we still see a version of Wolverine as played by Hugh Jackman at least once. Look, everyone knows that despite the X-Men movies being among the most mixed of mixed bags, and thus it being very much for the best, they're probably just going to do a full reboot for the MCU, the great missed opportunity is that we never got to see what will probably be for a whole generation or two, the iconic live-action Wolverine throw hands with one or two of the Avengers. It's just too bad. Well, meanwhile, over in the comics, in case you don't follow those, as of a few years back, in addition to the regular Once Again Alive Wolverine and Teenage Girl Wolverine, Marvel decided to have the Wolverine from the Old Man Logan timeline, or like a version of him, get zapped into the present-day Marvel Universe to hang out with everyone else as well. And to me, that always felt like a very clear water testing for at some point finding a multiverse or time travel or whatever else excuse to let Hugh Jackman drop into the soon-to-be-cooking MCU X-Men movies as a similar enough variation on his own Old Man Logan persona, just so they can check that box and deliver a moment. Like, I don't know how they'd justify it, but I'm sure someone wants to try. So Marvel Disney went ahead and announced Captain Marvel 2 is officially a go, which means I can now follow up on at least one of those prediction videos a little earlier than expected, because one of the X-Men entries had a few people sort of confused, which I can't blame anyone for, because while Carol Danvers is sort of the foundation on which a bunch of key X-Men mythos is built, but almost none of it has to do with the Captain Marvel mythos is bizarre enough of a concept, there's the added issue that for any of it to make sense requires, in no particular order, one to be familiar with a cancelled series from the 1970s, stories from that series that weren't actually published until years later but alluded to anyway at the time, character details that could only ever be alluded to because of censorship, and an infamous story that was published but Marvel would prefer you forget they ever did.
Well, you're not wrong.
But okay, in case this actually does end up being relevant, here's the still abbreviated but slightly more detailed version of why a lot of people, myself included, think it's possible that the X-Men characters Mystique and Rogue might turn up as villains in Captain Marvel 2.
Comics are weird!
Okay, to recap this one more time, Carol Danvers is not Marvel Comics' first Captain Marvel, she's just the first one that actually caught on as popular long-term. The original was the guy named Mar-Vell, who was created in the late 70s entirely to prevent DC from being able to call Shazam by his original name.
You sure that's what Marvel would want?
Mar-Vell.
That's what I said.
It's 2 words. Mar-Vell.
Mar-Vell. Marvel sounds a lot better, you know, like the Marvelettes.
And who appeared in a retooled form with a compressed story arc in the Captain Marvel movie as a female character played by Annette Bening, because if you're gonna troll the man-children, troll hard. Carol shows up later on as his distaff counterpart Miss Marvel in a series that doesn't quite make it to 30 issues, but does impress Marvel editorial thanks to the eventual reworking under writer Chris Claremont, who used the book to introduce several big concepts he'd later bring with him into his better-known run on the X-Men franchise like Mystique. So yes, a bunch of the big esoteric business that eventually becomes the center of the X-Men universe during what's considered its still definitive run, a lot of that apparently started out as unfinished Miss Marvel concepts Claremont brought with him. But since he didn't bring Miss Marvel herself, the company ended up using her in the infamous Avengers storyline, where she was unknowingly impregnated by an interdimensional villain, gave birth to an adult clone of said villain, and then left to marry the guy, which the book and the team treated as an odd but ultimately okay love story, instead of, you know, rape.
Everybody got that?
Meanwhile, Claremont had continued Mystique's story into the X-Men books, pairing her up with what he intended to be a female love interest named Destiny and an adopted daughter in Rogue, both of whom were supposed to have had a serious hate-on for Miss Marvel for reasons involving a psychic premonition that were to have been outlined in a pair of stories left unpublished from the cancelled Miss Marvel book, which Marvel then scheduled to be published in the anthology series Marvel Fanfare in order to make the X-Men storyline more clear, but then didn't, so it was never actually clarified, but everyone forgot to be annoyed about that because the X-Men stories kinda jumped from there into some of the biggest moments everyone remembers it for. Oh, and also Claremont was never allowed to explicitly say Mystique and Destiny were a lesbian couple, but it was still pretty clear.
Why are you looking at me like that? Wait. I told you it's not because I like you.
I mean, I didn't say anything.
Remind me to explain how Nightcrawler was supposed to fit into this, by the way. That's a whole other thing. In any case, Claremont was one of the many people who was not thrilled by how Miss Marvel's pregnancy story had been handled over in the Avengers books, so he opted to take that narrative back during his first use of Mystique, Destiny, and Rogue as villains in the X-Men books. Carol Danvers shows up on Earth having lost her Miss Marvel abilities in a recent battle with the power-absorbing Rogue, thus explaining why Rogue is suddenly much stronger and can fly now, and she chews out the Avengers for having been useless during the whole "do you idiots not know what a rape is when you see one" situation, tells them to fuck off, and opts to be the X-Men's new regular human pal for a while. And then like 30 years of other crazy stuff happens, and now she's Captain Marvel. Wow, that makes even less sense than I remember it making. So why do people think that they might try to grab a version of this convoluted, self-referential mess for the movie? Well, one, they gotta get the X-Men in here somewhere, and having the popular ones turn up in different movies might be a faster solution than just dropping a few dozen new people into one movie. And mainstream audiences already know and like Rogue, and especially Mystique. I mean, any random Marvel character morphing into a naked blue chick in a post-credit scene or a trailer is guaranteed to get a huge pop from audiences. You know this.
Here I come. Oh, here I come.
Two, they have to know eventually they're gonna run into a Superman problem with Captain Marvel, i.e. where do you go for tension when your protagonist is invincible and can punch out a spaceship? Like, yeah, it was really refreshing, funny, unexpected, and thematically appropriate for her to just blast the guy across the desert at the end of the first one instead of another tedious fight scene.
Prove to me you can beat me without...
But you can't do that every time. So in terms of solutions to that, oh shit, Rogue took like a third of my power, now I'm only almost a god, would be somewhat elegant and at least an interesting complication. Now, whatever the real plan is, of course, we'll find out soon enough. The same combination of the virus community deciding to give a big old "oh yeah" to everyone who said the ending to War of the Worlds wasn't realistic, and the United States electing to see what would happen if the entire country was run by leaders somehow even dumber than its citizens that produced this lovely moment of mass self-inflicted cabin fever has also caused a bunch of big movies to get delayed for public safety, and certainly not because they won't earn as much if they come out while lots of theaters are closed and or empty. One film that hasn't been bumped as of this writing is Disney and Marvel's Black Widow. One assumes partly because the mouse didn't want to move everything just in case things blow over in time, and with Marvel you have the face-saving excuse of, hey, the MCU movies can't move around too much because they have to open in a certain order so as to not upset our carefully planned overarching master narrative Oh, we just found out we can use Spider-Man after all. Quick, rewrite the whole second act of Civil War. Oh, and also 2 years ago, we kind of screwed up and let morons from the internet trick us into temporarily firing the guy who does the Guardians movies, so part 3 of that isn't coming out this summer anymore, and we really need this. Anyway, this has itself had the secondary effect of turning the Marvel movie rumor machine up to 11, because movie rumor reporters gotta eat too, and the doozy of a leak that went up the flagpole last week, hey, you know that a lot of these leaks are studios deliberately testing the waters on whether or not they should do a thing, right? Was that Marvel Studios' potential development slate might now include a movie, or maybe TV or streaming project, based around Squadron Supreme. Who? And if you're wondering why the prospect of this minor, mostly unknown outside fans' property getting a look was so exciting to some folks, well, if this was something they actually went and did, it could go either way like any other project. Even if it wasn't great, in this case, its very existence would constitute possibly the most hilariously over-the-top, minds bigger than yours, big swinging dick power move of a public sucker-punch by a major Hollywood studio to another major studio in decades. See, Squadron Supreme isn't just another team of costume weirdos, they're the Marvel Comics universe parody of the Justice League. an entire collection of thinly disguised Brand X version of DC Comics' biggest heroes, essentially willed into existence for the express purpose of having basically Superman and friends basically get shown up, beat up, or both by the Avengers once in a while, and just like the real thing, eventually get hopelessly lost in self-inflicted continuity snarls that honestly even I have trouble keeping up with.
Comics are weird!
Alright, so Squadron Supreme was created by Roy Thomas and Sal and John Buscema across a set of 2 Avengers stories between 1969 and 71, originally appearing as an outright villain team from another dimension called Squadron Sinister, and then a different near-identical heroes who frequently get manipulated into being anti-heroes incarnation from another other dimension, and their gimmick is pretty much what it says on the packaging. They're just different enough stand-ins for the Justice League, purposefully rendered as obviously close to their original selves as was legally allowable, because hey, why not? There's been expansions and contractions and different versions of the roster since, but the usual membership generally consists of Hyperion, Nighthawk, Power Princess, Amphibian, Dr. Spectrum, The Whizzer, Skylark, Skrullian Skymaster, and my personal favorite, Wyatt McDonald,
I don't get it.
alias the Golden Archer.
Oh, now I get it.
And as you might note, while there's some fun had at the general expense of naming conventions, there's not actually a lot of parody going on here initially. This was less Marvel making fun of DC than Ascended fanboy Patient Zero himself, Roy Thomas, getting to do Avengers vs. Justice League stories without having to negotiate for a real crossover. And after their turns with the Avengers visiting their universe, the Squadron started popping up in the mainline Marvel universe, aka Earth 616, as mind-controlled villain pawns to battle the likes of Thor, the Defenders, etc., eventually getting freed and sent back to their reality, only to find it having fallen into apocalyptic chaos in their absence. And that's where the property took an unexpected turn in both reality and its fictional storyline. In 1985, then top dog Marvel editor and writer Mark Grunwald used the Returning to a Fallen World concept as the foundation for a groundbreaking 12-issue Squadron Supreme maxi series that attempted to merge traditional Marvel superhero storytelling with a more mature approach to the political and philosophical questions raised by the genre that's often compared to a more optimistic counterpart to Alan Moore's Watchmen, but in fact actually came out first. The story itself prefigures a lot of other later takes on the same concept, following the Squadron's attempt to use their powers to not only rebuild the world, but also take control of world governments and create a utopian society, or try to, which of course doesn't exactly work out, leads to ideological feuding between the members, some tragic deaths, a disbanding of the team, and general lessons in hubris. Regarded by many as Grunwald's greatest achievement as a writer, he was so passionate about the project that his dying wish was to have his cremated ashes mixed into the ink that would be used to print the single-volume collected edition of the series in 1997. Which happened. More immediately, there was a one-off follow-up by Grunwald in 1989 called Death of a Universe, which ended with the Squadron themselves now marooned in regular Marvel timeline, after which they became infrequent cameo players in other people's books before mostly disappearing, but shortly after Grunwald's aforementioned passing, young at 43, tragic stuff, they reappeared in a 1998 Avengers storyline that sent them back to their own reality and a New World Order one-shot that attempted to tie a bow off on the whole concept. But they didn't stay exactly gone again, and you might want to pause and pop a headache medication of your choosing at this point.
Here, take 2 of these.
Ah, new print. Little. Yellow. Different.
The early to mid-2000s series Exiles, a team of Marvel B and C-listers who zip between dimensions and realities fixing continuity problems and reviving old fan-favorite characters, had the two teams meet up to remind everyone that the Squadron existed, basically. But the next regular return for the concept came in the form of another alt-universe reworking, this time as a mature readers-only ultra-dark reimagining from J. Michael Straczynski called Supreme Power. Short version that was pretty much The Boys, but without the boys. It was popular and well-regarded by fans until after about 3 years, Marvel Editorial attempted to retool it into a more mainstream reader-friendly format once again, titled Squadron Supreme, which is not confusing at all, which was not only not well-received and ended on a then-unresolved cliffhanger after 7 issues, as Marvel pivoted to a big all-hands-on-deck creators crossover event between the then-still-separate Ultimate Marvel Universe and the Supreme Power Universe continuity called Ultimate Power, which in turn led to a 2008 revival series closer to its original tone that also helped load the bases for a run of reality crossing and continuity merging crossover events Marvel was big on at the time thanks to Jonathan Hickman's Avengers megastory, which itself allowed for yet another normal Marvel Universe incarnation of the Squadron to be formed in 2015. This one made up of different members of the team from different versions of reality drafted in from their respective universes, really, which most recently played a big part in the War of the Realms storyline as a US government-backed official hero team being led by the recently resurrected Marvel 616 version of Agent Phil Coulson, and y'all can go look up what that whole thing turned out to be on your own. But okay, continuity nonsense aside, there's very little chance that any of that would wind up in an MCU version of the Squadron Supreme, so why would they do this and why would people want to see it?
That
just raises further questions.
Well, I assume the main version is self-evident, right? The Avengers or whoever else versus bootleg versions of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. is a fun-sounding pitch, and on a meta level, the idea of Disney and Marvel essentially putting out their own Justice League movie, while Warner Brothers is still trying to put the DCEU back together after their attempt at the real thing blew up in their faces, is kind of hilarious to contemplate, especially given the fun you could have with the casting. Like, do you bring Ryan Reynolds in to do even more shitting on Green Lantern? Get Nicolas Cage for Hyperion? Is it funnier to imagine Affleck doing Nighthawk or George Clooney? However, I'm also given the wonder if the timing of this consideration, if it is actually being considered, means they'd be leaning more in Supreme Power's direction than the original concept, mostly because of its tonal similarity to The Boys, and that show's popularity along with other recent superheroes but dark edgy assholes have begun to have, since predictably that started gaining traction right around the time that we've had a decade of MCU movies for people to start getting tired of heroes who are always family-friendly good guys. In that context, I'd call it more than plausible that the mouse might want to get out in front of that curve by porting in the edgy and dirty version of the Squadron to serve as effectively an effigy, a way for the inevitable next incarnation of the Avengers, or whoever, to literally punch back at the idea that their version of the superhero genre needs to be supplanted by gritty, nihilistic deconstructionist takes.
Girls get it done.
You know, basically like an MCU equivalent to Joe Kelly's What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way storyline, aka Superman versus the Elite.
People don't want babysitters in spandex to spank them when they're bad. They want surgeons to cut out the cancers that fester in us and make sure they never come back. Funny, isn't it? A life of truth, justice in the American military capitalist way. And in the end, you die on the moon wondering if your bowels will let go.
How does it feel to be deconstructed? To be the victim?
You're living in a dream world!
Good. Dreams save us. Dreams lift us up and transform us into something better.
All that being said, do I think it's likely overall that any Squadron Supreme movie might actually get made? I mean, guys, at this point, I don't even know how to answer those kinds of questions anymore. Like, does it sound unlikely? Sure, it sounds exactly as unlikely as, like, a Moon Knight TV show or a movie about the goddamn Eternals. And we're getting both of those, so assuming we all survive, I guess we'll find out. Hey, Marvel movie rumors. That should help distract us from living in literal hell for between 6 and 10 minutes. The latest gossip surrounds actor Jonathan Majors, apparently having been cast in a major Marvel Cinematic Universe multi-film role set to debut in a soon-to-shoot Ant-Man 3, once again directed by Peyton Reed. Good actor, happy to hear he may have picked up a big recurring part. The hot gossip, however, concerns the rumored but not yet confirmed identity of the actual character, with Deadline.com reporting sources close to the project believe he's playing long-standing Marvel villain Kang the Conqueror.
Who?
Alright, so yeah, this is an episode I was kind of hoping I wouldn't ever have to actually do, because the whole explaining comic book bullshit before they make it into a movie thing is kind of the obligatory lifeblood of this business, and still explaining Kang is just kind of a gigantic pain in the ass, because, well, he's one of those big cosmic ultra-threat bad guys who's generally the linchpin of big, long-term Marvel stories, i.e. he could either be the next Thanos or they want fans to think he'll be the next Thanos for a misdirection. Kang himself is at once incredibly confusing and, I'm sorry, very boring. Like, even his general design is just very Scandinavian minimalist furniture, you know? Oh, hey, another blue and or purple person in futuristic tunic with a hat that lets Kirby avoid having to draw ears. Cool. And his backstory is frustrating, I think would be the nice way to put it. Another way to put it would be, of course,
comics are weird.
See, Kang is basically a regular human-ish guy, more or less, with no special powers, but he's got a shitload of technology that's so advanced it's basically magic because he's a time traveler from the future, specifically the 31st century and then later, which, yes, sounds pretty optimistic, where he's conquered everything, and he likes to zip back and forth into points in the past and make sure the future stays that way. At least that was the initial idea. He showed up as a one-off Avengers villain early on in the run when pretty much every Avengers nemesis was just a super powerful person who'd show up unannounced, challenge them, get beat, and then leave to fight another day, because the Avengers was an idea the publisher kind of forced on Stan Lee and company, and it took them a while to figure out what they were actually supposed to do or be about. And if you're remembering, hey wait, doesn't any character, good or evil, having a time machine with zero defined usage limits break the universe? Like, even beyond the whole why not just come back every 30 seconds until the Avengers are just worn out from fighting in under an hour issue?
After the report, we'll time travel back to 2 days ago, steal your dad's keys, and leave them here. Where? I don't know. How about behind that sign? That way, when we get here now, they'll be waiting for us. See? Whoa, yeah!
Well, that's how Kang became, if not interesting, at least useful as the Marvel Universe walking embodiment of what I like to call explainium, i.e. the opposite inverse of handwavium, the shorthand for whichever mechanism a work of fiction deploys to skip past explaining either something impossible or a mistake in order to get back to the plot because that's the more interesting part of the story.
Ah, yeah. Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
I see, alright, yes. But in episode AG4...
Wizard.
For Glaven out.
Explainium is for the opposite situation, for when your story isn't original or not very good or your mistake actually was a mistake, and so instead of skipping ahead you just try to bury it in convoluted made-up sci-fi bullshit that sounds interesting, or even more convoluted mythos and lore connectivity that panders to fanboys by making them feel rewarded for recognizing all the references, i.e. when your editor says, wait, didn't we already do Thanos sends dinosaurs to kill Spider-Man, and then the writer says, no, see, that time Thanos was using the Time Stone to summon dinosaurs from prehistoric times, but this time he used the Reality Stone to create the dinosaurs he knew Spider-Man had seen in his childhood nightmares by using the Mind Stone. So you see, this is totally different story. So after some recurring appearances where it got fleshed out that Kang was actually just a history scholar from the 31st century who found out Dr. Doom invented time travel once, dug up the research, and used it to zip around the past, and set up an even further post-apocalyptic future where he could be a conqueror, Kang got repurposed as Marvel's retroactive time-traveling Scooby-Doo villain throughout the Silver and Early Bronze Age. Whenever Marvel wanted to revisit an old story and beef up its place in the mythos, or just patch a hole in the continuity, it was Kang all along. The Scarlet Centurion, that was Kang. And since he was revealed to have been the evil Egyptian pharaoh Rama-Tut, that was also Kang, despite having been introduced in the pages of a Fantastic Four comic a year before Kang's first appearance in the Avengers comic. Kang is also Immortus, though technically he's the even further into the future version of Kang that doesn't like Kang, and at one point, because of all the time-changing, there were many Kangs who were opposed to each other. Yeah, but Immortus is often thought to be the alpha dog of them since, the name, and he's got the big hat, right? Oh, he's also the father of Marcus, the interdimensional sleazeball who raped Carol Danvers in order to impregnate her with a clone of himself so he could be reborn in a human body and marry her. Yeah, that whole thing, that's also a Kang story. Great. So was the Celestial Madonna saga, which, you know what, I don't have the time or drugs to explain that thing here, and I've got a sinking feeling that another project is going to make it necessary to explain it anyway in the near future. So for now, that was where Vision married Scarlet Witch, but it was a double wedding where Mantis also married a magic tree because she was going to give birth to vegan New Age Christ or something, and Immortus officiated.
Right. Wish this was about sex. We loved each other. We had a child together. What? I conceived a child with million ants and it died inside me because it was 500,000 ants and half collapsing star!
Oh yeah, he's also a random small-town Wisconsin mayor in 1901 named Victor Timely who seeds Phineas Horton's mind with the plans to later create Jim Hammond, the original android version of the Human Torch during World War II. Oh hey, do you remember that you've already seen him in the MCU?
What'd you tell her about me? Only the good stuff.
Welcome to the Modern Marvels Pavilion and the world of tomorrow.
Ah, hell, now they got me doing it. And he's also Iron Lad, a teenage Kang from his original timeline, who figures out that he's going to grow up to be Kang the Conqueror. Oh, did I not mention Kang, not his real name? Gee, that seems important. And decides he doesn't want to be a supervillain, so he's going to fix things by going back to the 21st century, dressing up like Tony Stark, and forming the teenage superhero cover band, the Young Avengers, in the wake of the first Civil War event.
What's the matter, Pop? I'm confused.
Okay, so the bad news is, Kang the Conqueror is kind of a dull character who makes everything more confusing, only exists to be confusing himself, and is only prominent in the first place because for a long time he was the only suitably noteworthy regular Avengers villain other than Ultron who belonged to the Avengers as a team, as opposed to being the nemesis of a specific hero who happened to also be an Avenger. The good news is, if this is true, that doesn't really matter because this is for the movies, Jonathan Majors is a good actor, and Marvel Studios totally reworks the villains from the ground up all the time. So a guy whose basic backstory and whole deal with all the other stuff, likely including the stupid hat, stripped out, would still end up letting Marvel riff on an unlicensed evil version of the Doctor bouncing around their continuity causing trouble would have a lot of possibilities, not just as a bad guy to fight, but as a way to kick off and or resolve storylines, especially since, given that Avengers Endgame established that the MCU's version of time travel operates on an assumption of quantum multiverse branching mechanics rather than ripple effect, and MCU Kang would logically have to be capable of traversing dimensions as well as time. But speaking of ripple effects, one reason to cover these, admittedly just shy of clickbait casting stories, is, well, people watch these, frankly, but also because the way one role is cast can sometimes tell you how other roles are trending. Specifically, in the comics, Kang the Conqueror's real name is Nathaniel Richards. And since in superhero universes there's no such thing as coincidental name sharing...
Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name!
Yes, at least the last time I was able to make coherent sense of his origins, Nathaniel Richards is meant to be the distant descendants of Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. Bear in mind, this character is apparently meant to debut in Ant-Man 3, which is being directed by Peyton Reed. Now, somewhat famously, Peyton Reed was supposed to direct a Fantastic Four movie at Fox back in the 90s, but the studio ultimately turned down his take, which reportedly would have skipped the origin story and been a highly stylized period film set in the mid-1960s of the original comics, and made the 2 Jessica Alba movies instead. And it's been rumored pretty much since the first Ant-Man did way more box office than anyone expected out of Ant-Man that Marvel had been considering having Reed take another shot once they got the property back, which they've now done. So if Majors, an African-American actor, is playing a character who's supposed to be related to the Richards family, traditionally depicted as white characters, we might have a big clue now as to how the MCU's take on the Fantastic Four might differ from the versions we've seen previously in literally every other medium. That would be a significant change, and kind of a big deal. One can only imagine what internet fandom culture's calm, measured, thoughtful, forward-looking, and broadly considered take on the matter would be were it to come to pass. Right? And the abyss stares back ever deeper. And so we got ourselves a WandaVision trailer, apparently December, maybe premiere date, because among all the many Marvel Cinematic Universe projects that were in the offing for what was planned as the studio's big, all-new, all-different 2020, this one was the one that was mostly shooting indoors on closed sets and green screen, and thus apparently got most of the way finished before the world ended.
Damn it, why?
Wanda, welcome home.
Anyway, creepy 1950s and or early 60s and maybe also 70s and 80s, but the parts that were nostalgic for the former TV sitcom milieu, complete with Kitty from that 70s show doing an ironic cameo, so we know something isn't totally right, and also there's some FBI and or maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. agents because the ABC show is over and we can talk about S.H.I.E.L.D. in the main timeline again, and also some stuff in possibly the real world, so maybe the weird-looking parts are a dream, a simulation, some Westworld business, multiverse, alternate timeline, and Vision is maybe the actual protagonist, or at least the main audience POV character who knows that something isn't right and is trying to figure out what's wrong, but also he knows he's supposed to be dead, perhaps?
Am I dead? No. Why would you think that?
Because you are.
So yeah, as many suspected, we seem to be dealing with either a combination of or reference to a couple of different storylines involving Vision, Scarlet Witch, their extremely melodramatic romance storylines, and her ability in the comics to alter the fabric of reality versus her ability in the movies to be a compelling enough presence that you forget that in 4 films, they still haven't really explained what it is she does yet.
I don't even know who you are.
You will.
Pretty much exactly 1 year ago, we ran an episode here positing a theory as to where that's all going, and since I don't see anything that cancels any of that out yet, roll tape. In the comics, when Scarlet Witch and Vision got married, they moved to the suburbs and had 2 kids of their own, even though he's a robot using magic and science because comic book, but it ended up badly because the 2 kids weren't actually real, or rather more unreal than they were supposed to have been, and the devil, like literally the devil, was involved in all of it. Look, they changed what was actually going on here a few times retroactively, but basically the kids were blinked out of existence in the end, and this was so traumatic everyone who knew about it agreed it was just best to wipe the whole incident from Wanda's memory and just never bring it up again.
Not a great plan.
Then in 2004, Wanda remembers her kids and goes crazy, was used as the inciting incident for Avengers Disassembled, which ended the original version of the Avengers and kicked off the entire 21st century Marvel Universe event storyline cycle, including New Avengers, Illuminati, House of M, Civil War, World War Hulk, Secret Invasion, all of it. Oh, also House of M was the one that established she can create an alternate universe or multiverse if she wants to. So the fact that the MCU versions of Quicksilver and Vision are both back in some way for WandaVision seems like a pretty clear tell that the series will be doing a Scarlet Witch creates a fake happy ending alternate universe storyline, and that it's probably not going to end well for her. And the fact that the series will shortly be followed on the release schedule by Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, in which she's scheduled to be a supporting character, leads me to ask the following question. What if what they're not saying yet is that WandaVision is going to end so badly for the title characters that Wanda isn't just the co-star in Doctor Strange 2, she's the villain? I mean, incidentally, regarding why specifically Wanda's psyche broke down in the comics, Multiverse of Madness is kind of an awkward title, but it's also an acronym. As to what else might be happening in the actual show, well, they obviously want you to watch to find that part out, but if I'm making a guess with the available information, I would venture that the general idea is Wanda, either of her own volition or some coaxing from an outside party, is undertaking some kind of procedure to reconstruct or revive the Vision's consciousness. He is an artificial intelligence, not strictly a spirit, remember, and this is probably not having entirely positive consequences elsewhere, and that other entities, including maybe Vision himself, are attempting to work around, impede, or even stop this. Glimpsed briefly in the trailer, but not named, is Catherine Hahn as a character so far only credited as Agnes the Nosy Neighbor, who seems to know more than she lets on.
Because you are?
It's heavily rumored that she's playing the MCU incarnation of a character named Agatha Harkness, a literal Salem witch, who in the comics version of all this was Wanda's magic teacher and partly responsible for the reality-changing issues that allowed for the creation and then erasure of Wanda and Vision's not-supposed-to-exist magic babies. Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how they make all of this work in a version that anyone is gonna take seriously. She and Quicksilver are also raised as babies by a midwife who is an artificially hyper-evolved humanoid cow. Her name is Bova. I don't think you'll need to know that, but aren't you kinda glad you know that now? Also, Teyonah Parris is here as the now grown-up version of Monica Rambeau. You may remember that she appeared in child form, played by Akira and Azira Akbar, as the daughter of Lashana Lynch's character in Captain Marvel. Monica is actually a pretty important figure in the Marvel Universe in her own right, as the original first woman to bear the title Captain Marvel, during a period in the comics where they kinda gave up on trying to make anyone give a shit about Marvel's dumb mythology, but still needed to hold on to that trademark. Since then, she also has hung around under the names Photon, Pulsar, Spectrum, kind of a fan-favorite character, so if they're planning on doing more with her, that presumably starts here. So that could be interesting. Speaking of which, not appearing in the trailer, but apparently confirmed for the series, are returning MCU veterans Randall Park as Jimmy Woo from the Ant-Man movies, and Kat Denning as Darcy, Jane Foster's science buddy from the first two Thors.
All the answers you seek will be yours once I reclaim Mjolnir.
Mjolnir? What's Mjolnir? Darcy? Jane!
Yeah. Sylvie!
Mjolnir!
Which is probably significant since Jane is coming back for Thor Love and Thunder, and you'll recall the thing both of them were researching in the first place was portals into and out of other parts of space and reality. In any case, it certainly looks interesting. It's definitely not the way I think a lot of people were expecting Phase 4 of this whole enterprise to get kicked off, certainly unconventional in that respect. I think what interests me the most, though, outside of the general who's that and what's going on fandom ephemera, is the realization that the 1950s TV suburbia aesthetic itself has now been mainly used as a nightmare scenario reference to itself for so long that presently 25 and under generation may only recognize it as that, i.e. these hallmarks are innately scary now, right? What I mean is, to me, currently approaching my 40th birthday, the opening salvo of this would seem to be going for an, this is weird and off but kinda cute sort of vibe, given that my generation still grew up with stuff like Bewitched and Leave It to Beaver reruns as daytime TV background noise and would thus associate it, at least somewhat, with the sincerely intended sense of banal, harmless comfort food security and safety it was originally meant to provide. I mean, that's what's meant to make actually know this is supposed to be scary rug pulls like Blue Velvet or Parents or apparently WandaVision work in the first place, or at least that used to be the case. But at this point, thinking on it, I have to assume that, like I said, anyone like 25 or 20 and under, maybe even a little older than that, who grew up with only like the Fallout games or Pleasantville or The Truman Show or other movies, shows, whatever, where this aesthetic and soundscape and general look is always supposed to be a sign of this is a nightmare simulation instead of the reruns and whatnot, already has an entirely different reaction, right? Like the minute the footage is in black and white and everyone is smiling too much and the people are wearing sweater vests indoors like that's a thing you do and there's Muzak and wearing poodle skirts. I mean, that just might as well be a tape recording of Leatherface's basement in terms of, oh no, this is the bad place, we need to get the hell out right now, right? Like, am I off base about this? In which case, I'm interested to see if the actual WandaVision series is coming at it more from that perspective now, or if they actually try to draw out the everything is fine misdirection. I mean, assuming we make it to December, I guess we'll find out.